Chapter 221. The defense of the capital was a victory. Walla's army withdrew from the capital, from the territory that had once belonged to the Great Ming. Everything seemed calm once more, and the hearts of the people in the capital calmed down. Zhu Qiyu's position as emperor had been secured. With Zhu Qiyu's position secured, Zhu Qizhen became much more impatient. In the imperial palace of Nanjing. With Zhu Qizhen's entrance, the palace was filled with eunuchs and palace maids, and it was bustling with activity. Moreover, Nanjing had originally been the capital of the Ming dynasty, so it had been extremely prosperous, allowing the southern imperial court of the Great Ming to quickly establish itself. Many officials who had come from the capital were placed in important positions, and with the 6 bureaus in Nanjing, it didn't take long for the various departments to begin their normal operations. But Zhu Qizhen was not satisfied with all this, because he had just received news from the embroidered uniform guard. With Yang Chendong's intervention, the defense of the capital had been won, and Tile had retreated, allowing the Great Ming to once more return to peace. When Walla's army had approached the capital, many officials had analyzed that Zhu Qiyu would find it very difficult to defend the capital with the soldiers he had. And once the capital fell, Zhu Qiyu, the new emperor, would have nowhere to go, and the officials who followed him would naturally fall apart. Thus, it would be time for Zhu Qizhen to unify the world. At that time, he would immediately head north. If he could defeat Tile's army and take back the capital of the Great Ming dynasty, he would be able to completely erase the humiliation of Tu Mu's defeat. He might even become a famous sovereign of his generation. But before this dream could even begin, it was already over. When he learned that the capital had been saved and that Walla had retreated, Zhu Qizhen felt a suffocating feeling in his heart that made him extremely uncomfortable. "Your Majesty!" Chao Jixiang, the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, who was gradually grasping power and even replacing Wang Zhen, saw that Emperor Ying's complexion was extremely unsightly and softly asked, This call brought Zhu Qizhen's mind back to reality, and when he saw that it was Chao Jixiang who had called him, he couldn't help but ask, "Does Great Companion have something to say?" Zhu Qizhen addressed Chao Jixiang as grand partner, just like how he addressed Wang Zhen as Mr. It had to be said that a leopard couldn't change its spots. In the Battle of Tuma Fortress, he was implicated by Wang Zhen and suffered a lot. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong's timely intervention, he would have become a captive. However, after he became the emperor again, he still put the eunuchs around him in important positions. Perhaps he was used to it. Perhaps this was the rule of the Ming dynasty. Only by using eunuchs in important positions could the emperor enjoy the right to speak. "Your Majesty, the Count of Loyalty played an important role in the defense of the capital, and his appearance ruined Your Majesty's plans. Your Majesty, do you want this subject to send someone to the capital? As long as something happens to him and the news is sent to the Walla, it probably won't be long before they attack the border again, and Your Majesty's chance will come." Chao Jixiang had not forgotten the humiliation he had received from the Yang family guards outside the Yang family manor. He had been looking for an opportunity to take revenge. Zhu Qizhen was really moved for a moment. His wish was to reunite the Great Ming dynasty, and Yang Chendong had undoubtedly become a strong wall, blocking his dream. If something happened to this person, the situation would probably change very quickly. In this way, his chance might really appear. His heart was moved, but he concluded that last time he only listened to Wang Zhen and did not listen to the words of the officials. This time, Zhu Qizhen learned his lesson and did not immediately express his opinion. He only nodded and said, "How about this? Call the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, I have something to ask him." Chao Jixiang knew that the emperor had listened to his words. He must have called Kuang Yi to ask about the feasibility of the matter. After he agreed, he turned and walked out. He personally went to Kuang Ye's residence to pass on the decree. Although the new palace had just been built, there were many eunuchs who followed Chao Jixiang to Nanjing. At least, things like passing on the decree did not require the head eunuch to do it personally. However, Chao Jixiang still came. When he appeared in Kuang Ye's residence, the Minister of War was really shocked. "Minister Kuang, the emperor has summoned you to the palace. He has something to ask you, please." After seeing Kuang Yi, Chao Jixiang tried his best to show an acceptable smile. Ever since Wang Zhen's incident, Kuang Yi and the other important officials, especially those who had survived the Tuma rebellion, had always hated eunuchs. This time, when they saw Chao Jixiang personally come to pass on the decree, they were also unhappy. However, since the emperor had a decree, they had to obey. He changed into an official's robe and followed Chao Jixiang and the others out of Kuang Ye's residence. However, just as they left the residence, Chao Jixiang changed his expression and walked up to them and said in a low voice, "Minister Kuang, this time the emperor wants to ask about the matter of Count Zhongdan Yang Chendong. This eunuch suggests to the emperor to get rid of this person and cut off one of Prince Cheng's arms. Minister Kuang, please be careful with your words." After saying this, Chao Jixiang turned and walked into his palanquin. He had already reminded Kuang Yi, and he believed that Kuang Yi would know what to say. He left Kuang Yi alone in his palanquin and thought about the cause and effect of this matter with a grave expression. Yang Chendong had saved Kuang Ye's life. If they were officials in the same court, they should have been very close. However, because Prince Cheng became the Daizong, he came to Nanjing to be an official. Two emperors ruling at the same time. It sounded like a simple sentence, but there were too many things involved in it. Take Yang Chendong for example. As the Minister of War, Kuang Yi had his own sources of information. He already knew that this person was first given the title of Marquis Zhongdan, and then given the title of Duke Zhongdan for his great service in the defense of the capital. However, Chao Jixiang still called him Count Zhongdan. From this, it could be seen that some of the decrees of the Daizong were not accepted by the Ingzong. They used to be officials in the same court, but now that they were serving different masters, the relationship between them had become a big problem. Kuang Yi had expected that they would meet on the battlefield sooner or later, but he had not expected it to come so quickly, and the first person to be his savior, Yang Chendong. Not to mention that Yang Chendong couldn't be repaid for saving his life, he couldn't let anything happen to Yang Chendong now. Otherwise, Ingzong might not be able to stabilize his position in Nanjing. He had just resettled his home in Nanjing, and he might have to move again. No matter how he thought about it, it seemed impossible. In the palanquin, Kuang Yi made up his mind. By the time he reached the imperial palace, Kuang Yi had already made up his mind. After entering the palace and seeing the Ingzong, he first kneeled and bowed before slowly getting up. "Beloved official Kuang, you should have heard that we won the defense of the capital. Right now, the capital must be very lively, and everyone should be celebrating." As soon as he saw Kuang Yi, Ingzong's face showed a sorrowful expression. He seemed to remember the scene where everyone escaped from the Tuma castle under the protection of Yang Chendong and the mercenaries he hired. The Duke of Zhongdan blocked the entrance of the Wala and guarded the northern gate of the Great Ming Dynasty, giving us more time to recruit, and manage the soldiers. It is a blessing for the country. Kuang Yi said these high-sounding words while paying attention to Zhu Qizhen's expression. Hearing Kuang Yi praise Yang Chendong like this, Zhu Qizhen's face showed a trace of displeasure. "The Duke of Zhongdan saved the emperor and is an important official that I rely on. But why did he stay in the capital in the north and not come back? Now, he helped King Yu block the Wala and made his name known all over the world. Isn't this going against me? Because of this, someone advised me to invite the Duke of Zhongdan to Nanjing. If he doesn't agree, we can use extreme measures. Beloved official Kuang, what do you think?" When he asked this question, Zhu Qizhen's eyes shone with a cold light, as if he wanted to see through Kuang Ye's heart at this moment. Fortunately, Kuang Yi was prepared. After hearing Zhu Qizhen's words, he did not panic. Instead, he pretended to be deep in thought, first nodding and then shaking his head. "Beloved official, what do you mean?" Seeing Kuang Yi nod and shake his head, Zhu Qizhen was confused for a moment. "Your Majesty, in this official's view, it is not impossible to invite the Duke of Zhongdan to Nanjing, but I'm afraid that he won't be willing to come. The immortal abode, heaven beyond heaven, and I heard that King Yu promised him to set up a bank of the Yang clan in the capital. With so many transactions, I really don't dare to think that he will give them up. As for forcing him to come, I'm afraid that the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards won't be able to do it. Your Majesty, Please don't forget that the Duke of Zhongdan has the world's most elite mercenaries at his side. If this is done and it doesn't happen in the end, it will be equivalent to offending the Duke of Zhongdan. This official asks Your Majesty, are you ready to fall out with King Yu now? As soon as Kuang Yi opened his mouth, he suddenly asked a few questions, which stunned Zhu Qizhen. He asked suspiciously, Beloved official, what do you mean? Why do you invite the Duke of Zhongdan to fall out with King Yu? Seeing that Zhu Qizhen began to follow his train of thought, Kuang Yi pretended to be very excited and said, Your Majesty, think about it. What is the reason why we can coexist peacefully with King Yu now? Isn't it all because of the mediation of the Duke of Zhongdan in the capital? If something happens to him, there will be no barrier between us and King Yu. Now that the Walla has retreated, King Yu may gather all his forces to deal with us. Even now, the surrounding guards are not all controlled by us. As the Minister of War, this official does not dare to tell Your Majesty that the number of troops we can fight now is less than 50,000. According to the information he had received, 80,000 soldiers from the Bureau of Imperial Guards had been dispatched to the capital to rescue the emperor. If these people suddenly turn around and attack Nanjing, this official can't guarantee that we can win the battle. Chapter 222. There was no need for Kuang Yi to say anything else. He believed that Zhu Qizhen would be able to figure it out. Sure enough, when Ying Zong said this, his expression changed again and again. Perhaps it was because of the defeat at the Tuma Fortress, but he was still traumatized by war. He was truly afraid when he heard about it. Furthermore, with Kuang Ye's analysis, how could he still think about touching Yang Chendong? Not only that, he also had to ensure the safety of this person so that he could act as a barrier between him and King Yu. Good, I will remember Minister Kuang's words. It was I who did not think it through. Zhu Qizhen seemed like a completely different person. He was completely different from the emperor who had a murderous look in his eyes. Seeing this, Kuang Yi finally calmed down. This time, not only did he want to repay Yang Chendong for saving his life, he also did not have the confidence to do anything to this loyal duke. Think about it, even the elite cavalry of the Walla were defeated by this person. How could he be so easy to deal with? If he couldn't touch the other party, he would be provoked to point the saber at Nanjing. If that was the case, he was afraid that this time he really had nowhere to hide. Whether it was to repay the debt of gratitude or for himself. Kuang Ye's words completely dispelled Zhu Qizhen's thoughts about Yang Chendong. At this moment, Yang Chendong in the capital did not know that someone wanted to kill him. Of course, even if he knew, he might not care. With Lung Feng and the others in charge of his safety, he did not take any assassination seriously. 4 days had passed since the Walla retreated. Today was the day that the mercenaries retreated. With Lung Song as the leader and battalion commander Xiao Feng as the second, the two of them led the 200 mercenaries of the 1st and 2nd companies out of the capital. The ones left behind were the 3rd company led by Teng Shan and the 4th company led by Wu Sheng. These two people were left behind to replace Xiao Feng. This was because Yang Chendong intended to promote them. By his side, he could learn more things. In the future, when the system grew stronger and needed more high-ranking officers, there would not be a situation where there was no one to replace them. When Commander Lung Song left, he took with him the 1 million tons of copper and iron that Dai Zong had given him. For this matter, he had hired several thousand commoners to push the carts out of the capital. After paying so much, Dai Zong received an item and a promise. The object was a Type 81 rifle and 30 rounds of ammunition. The promise was a guarantee that the mercenaries would not easily attack Dai Zong. After paying so much, all he got in return was a gun and a guarantee. In the eyes of others, it seemed like he had lost out, and it was a huge loss. But in Dai Zong's eyes, it was worth it. With the first advanced firearm, with the ability of the Great Ming Empire's firearms department, they should be able to make a second one. Once he had this kind of advanced firearm, he would not be far from running amok in the world. He would be able to reunite the Great Ming Empire. A guarantee was equally important. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about others using mercenaries to deal with him. In order to obtain all of this, he only had to pay 1 million tons of copper and iron that he wouldn't be able to use in a short period of time. Of course, it was worth it. Perhaps this was what it meant to turn waste into treasure. Dai Zong was still in a state of ecstasy. He ordered people to hurry up and develop the Type 81 assault rifle so that they could produce results as soon as possible and benefit from it. At this time, the Yang Family Bank, which was opposite the Immortal residence and Sky Beyond Sky, had opened for business. Since it was Dong Shuai who made the move, it would definitely be extraordinary. 3 days ago, the Yang Family Bank had started to advertise the opening of the bank. There was a large introduction of the bank's function, and it promised that if money was deposited in the bank, one would be able to obtain extremely high interest rates. At the same time, it also sent out an invitation to ambitious businessmen who wanted to do business but lacked money. As long as you had something, whether it was land or houses, you could use it as collateral. Even if you didn't, you could also borrow money from the bank through a joint guarantee from 5 households. It also introduced the interest rates for depositing money in detail and also talked about some ways for people to borrow money. When the Yang Family Bank released the advertisement, it instantly attracted the attention of many people. In particular, the advertisement also said that in the first 3 days of the bank's opening, as long as someone deposited money, they would be given all kinds of small gifts. The more money they deposited, the better the gifts would be. For example, some people didn't have much extra money in their family and could only deposit 2 taels of silver at most. But even so, they could still receive a packet of toilet paper. The market price of this item was at least 2 taels of silver. In this way, it was equivalent to receiving 2 taels of silver for free. As for the 10 families with the highest savings, each of them would be given a divine object mirror. The first family would also receive 5 sets of extremely exquisite glass cups. Whether it was given away or sold, these were all extremely popular goods. With these as a catalyst, on the morning of the Yang Family Bank's opening, there was a crowd that blocked the nearby streets. Fortunately, there were people from the warden's office of the 5 cities here to take care of security, so there weren't any accidents. But when the time came, many people wanted to rush into the bank to deposit their money. There were also some people who stood outside the door to watch. Suddenly, the black cloth covering the Yang Family Bank was pulled away. Waves of golden light blinded many people's eyes. Originally, when they saw that the exterior of the Yang Family Bank was covered with a black cloth, some people thought that it was like the opening of the Immortal abode. They thought that the exterior should be covered with glass, which made it look bright and transparent, and also made it look high-end and classy. But who knew that the moment the black cloth was removed, there was indeed a thick glass, but inside the glass, there was an uncountable amount of gold that couldn't be calculated. With so much gold placed together, it emitted the color of brass. Under the illumination of the sun, coupled with the reflection of the sun, it flashed a golden light, giving people the feeling that they were looking at a mountain of gold. Just as everyone was still shocked by the scene in front of them, Yang Chendong personally appointed the general manager of the Yang Family Bank, his cousin Yang Fu, with a big belly, walked out under the protection of 2 men in camouflage uniforms. With a big belly and a kind smile, Yang Fu was now a person who had experienced big scenes. Back when he was in Jianing, it was only because he trusted Yang Chendong that he sponsored a few times and cooperated with him a few times. Who knew that he would earn more and more money, and his value would also increase. Later on, when he came to the capital with Yang Chendong and managed the Immortal abode in heavens beyond heaven, he increased his knowledge. In the past, when he saw a rank 7 official in Jianing, his legs would tremble. Now, even if he saw a duke, a marquis, a count, or a rank 2 or 3 official in the imperial court, he could still act very naturally. It was because of Yang Fu's ability and his ability to adapt to changes in the environment that Yang Chendong handed the heavy responsibility of the general manager of the bank to him this time. At this moment, Yang Fu was like the Minister of Finance, controlling this business giant wheel. It could be seen that as long as Yang Fu didn't have any other thoughts and was able to follow in Yang Chendong's footsteps, his future achievements would be limitless. The moment Yang Fu stood out, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Enjoying the attention of everyone, Yang Fu stood there for more than 10 breaths without saying a word. However, When the crowd quietened down because of his appearance, he coughed heavily and pointed forward. "Everyone, do you see that? The Yang family bank has sufficient gold and silver. This is where our confidence lies, and it is also a way to protect our depositors. You don't have to worry about whether your money will be wasted if you deposit it in the Yang family bank, because we have this gold as a guarantee. If you can't get your money back, then this gold will be yours. Everyone will make a profit and won't lose anything. Okay, we want to deposit money, we want to deposit money." The supporters, who had been hiding in the crowd, immediately shouted loudly. At the same time, they raised various amounts of silver and squeezed forward. It gave people the feeling that if they were a step late, they wouldn't have the chance to deposit money. The crowd was excited, and those who held the silver couldn't wait any longer. At this moment, there was no need for Yang Fu to make a long-winded speech, nor was there a need for him to instigate anything. The result was obvious. Satisfied, he turned around and walked into the bank. Following him was the army of savings behind him. In order to ensure that the business was done smoothly, they didn't let people wait for too long and showed efficiency. The entire Yang family bank took up a total of 3,000 square meters. With just this one move, they had to open up 5 or 6 large shops in succession before they could complete the task. It was all thanks to the previous battle that the capital was in a state of panic. This was why Yang Chendong was able to buy these properties at a cheap price. Now, they were all put to good use. In the 3,000 square meter hall, there were a total of 20 counters for depositing and withdrawing money, and 20 large bulletproof glasses were placed there. There were many bulletproof glasses in the warehouse that were prepared for important headquarters and vehicles. This time, Yang Chendong took out some of them. Since this was a bank, when it came to dealing with money, it couldn't be too much to guard against. In short, Yang Chendong wanted to show that not only could he guarantee his own safety, he also wanted to make sure that the scene was grand, so that every depositor could feel at ease and at ease. The red ropes leading to the 20 counters had been tied in advance to ensure that each passage was orderly, and there were enough drinks on the side of the passage. Although the ingredients were far inferior to those sold in the Immortal abode, this was still the first time the common folk had tasted something so good. For a moment, the demand for the drinks couldn't meet the demand. The hall was bustling with activity, with people coming and going. However many people went out, they would let in as many people as they wanted to, so that there would always be at least 500 customers in the hall. But even the depositors who had deposited money left empty-handed. It seemed extremely relaxed, but at the very least, it was completely different from when they had arrived with money in their hands and arms. But in reality, they were already carrying banknotes of various denominations. Chapter 223. These banknotes were made of carefully selected coin paper. A picture of a soaring dragon was printed on it, and the colors were balanced. More importantly, these banknotes not only had words on them to prevent counterfeiting, but they were also reprinted and suppressed. On the surface, it was impossible to see. Only when one touched it with their hands could they feel the uneven existence. And all of this was made by Yang Chendong, who first found a lot of materials in the large warehouse. Then he gave them to the munitions factory and printing factory in Xichen City to jointly produce good things. Many of the processes could not be done by one person, so it was equivalent to an additional safe process. In addition, some of the processes were only available in the large warehouse. As a result, it was impossible for others to forge them. And Yang Chendong firmly believed that with his arrival and the advanced knowledge he brought, science would develop step by step. The gap between the current level of science and technology would only grow bigger and bigger. It would be even harder for others to find an opportunity to catch up and surpass. There were free drinks to drink, free gifts to receive, and countless amounts of gold as guarantees. In addition to the light and simple banknotes, the Yang family bank became popular on the first day. It opened until the sky turned dark, and when it had to be forced to close, it had already absorbed a total of 7 million taels of silver. The good news was quickly sent to the Yang family manor 15 li south of the city. Without the danger of war, the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, returned here. For him, it was more reassuring to not live in a territory controlled by others. Without the threat of war, Yang Chendong spent the past few days with Hu Yan and Xiao Yin in addition to dealing with his daily work. In Hu Yan's words, Lu Lang was not young anymore. Her older brother and some of her friends had already become fathers when they were at his age. Since he had such a large family property, of course, he had to have enough people to carry on. So, after discussing with Xiao Yin, he pestered Yang Chendong every day when he was free, in order to give birth to the next generation as soon as possible. Yang Chendong really didn't understand. He was less than 20 years old. Why was he in such a hurry to have a child? His parents' bodies hadn't fully developed yet. What was the benefit of having a child in a hurry? Fortunately, Lady Shui and Lady Xiang were busy with their work. They were arranging the scene where the god of war Yang Chendong defeated the Walla's army. Besides, people who worked in the arts did not want to have children too early. Otherwise, their bodies would change. With two less people, Dong Shui could calmly deal with the two women. When Yang Si excitedly reported the good news of the 7 million yuan deposit in Yang Chendong's bank to his master, Yang Chendong, he was being fed dinner by Hu Yan and Xiao Yin. Yang Chendong was also shocked when he heard that the daily savings was 7 million taels. Good. It looks like the people of the great Ming dynasty really are rich. How about this? We have to strike while the iron is hot. Notify everyone that in the future, anyone who uses banknotes in the immortal abode or realm beyond heaven will be able to enjoy a 5% discount. Yang Chendong was stunned for a moment, but quickly reacted. He decided to add fuel to the fire. It would be best if he could get all the money in the hands of the great Ming dynasty's people, merchants, and nobles. If everyone used banknotes, then without him, the great Ming dynasty's economy would be crippled. At that time, who would dare to touch him? Yang Si left. He was excited when he came, but he was also excited when he left. After he left, Hu Yan, who was feeding him, asked with a puzzled expression, "Sixth brother, what do we need so much money for? We even have to get a 5% discount. Who knows how much less income we'll get?" Housekeeper, you're quite competent." Yang Chendong smiled and scratched the bridge of Hu Yan's nose. This was his signature gesture of intimacy with his woman. Seeing that even Hu Yan was starting to care about the business, Yang Chendong wasn't displeased at all. Instead, he said with an encouraging tone, "Using money to make transactions is really too wasteful. If this thing is passed around for a long time, it will wear and tear. That's equivalent to wasting an infinite amount of money. In addition, it's too heavy to make transactions. Sixth brother, you're doing a good deed to reduce everyone's losses. As for ourselves, didn't you say that we already have a lot of money? Doing something for the common people is something we should do." His words were dignified and righteous. Yang Chendong didn't explain that the difference in the price of silver and the quality of the silver would be the source of the profits for the Yang Bank. He also didn't say that he wanted to use this method to control the great Ming dynasty's economy. Although they were married, there were some things that he didn't want to hide from them. He was just afraid of scaring them. If he really told them about his ambition, it was possible for Hu Yan to faint from fright. Before he had enough strength or showed enough signs, Yang Chendong didn't want to scare his women and make them worry about him. All the pressure would be shouldered by himself. This was what a man should do. With Yang Chendong's decision, the news quickly spread the next day. For a time, the merchants who were still hesitating whether to deposit money in the bank were shaken. They took all the liquid funds and began to deposit in the Yang Bank, causing the turnover of the next day to exceed 8 million taels. In just 2 days, a total of 15 million taels of silver had been deposited. This was undoubtedly a major event that shook the world. Even the acting sect master, Zhu Qizhen, was shocked by this. In fact, such a result wasn't unexpected. First, the people of the great Ming dynasty who had just experienced the rule of Renxian still had some money in their hands. Second, the business strategy and promotion were in place. Third, the discount was enough. In addition, the reputation of the East Marshal had always been very good. Opposite him were his businesses, Immortal residence, and Sky Beyond Sky. The traffic there directly affected people's judgment and trust in him. Not to mention, he also had the support of the emperor. Zhu Qiyu had deposited 500,000 taels of silver. The other ministers followed suit. Naturally, this amount wasn't that shocking. But when the situation was reported to Zhu Qiyu, he was still shocked. 15 million taels. This was close to half of the Great Ming Dynasty's national treasury. This wealth belonged to one person. How could he not be shocked? The original Great Ming Dynasty's national treasury had experienced the efforts of several generations of monarchs. There was indeed some savings. However, the Great Ming Dynasty lost the Battle of Tumu and lost a lot. Later, when the two emperors ruled together, Emperor Yingzong took away some of the money. In addition, they spent a lot of money to hire mercenaries. Over time, they were only spending money. It was no wonder that the amount of money in the national treasury was gradually decreasing. In the palace, Zhu Qiyu made a difficult decision. Notify the Ministry of Revenue to calculate and collect the business tax. Disregarding everything else, just how much money could they earn from the Yang clan's bank every year with a business tax of 100 to 1? With this as bait, Daizong couldn't help but be tempted. He had no choice but to use some methods. Although doing so would offend some merchants and nobles, and would even cause some people to be dissatisfied, this was the only way to replenish the national treasury. Jining knew what the consequences of the emperor's decision would be, but seeing how Yang Chendong was earning so much money, they couldn't just do nothing. The country had always relied on collecting taxes to survive, and this was a matter of course. Thus, they didn't raise any objections and went to the Ministry of Revenue to pass down the decree. As the new Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian had always wanted to make some achievements, but he had never had a suitable opportunity. Now that the business tax had appeared, he knew that his opportunity had come. He immediately led a group of subordinates and quickly came up with some regulations. In just a few days, the details of the business tax were announced in the capital. Once the business tax was announced, and it was done so quickly, it immediately attracted the dissatisfaction of many merchants. How could anyone who could become a merchant be an ordinary person? Either he was smart, or he had a strong background. Collecting the business tax was tantamount to touching their interests. Because of this, an unexpected guest had come to the Yang clan manor. It wasn't exactly an unexpected guest. This person was Dong Shuai's relative, his sixth brother-in-law, Bai Peng. When his sixth sister, Yang Qin, had married into the Bai clan, the Yang clan had been in a period of decline. The status of a merchant wasn't high, and the marriage alliance had been looked down upon. However, in order to support the Yang clan, Yang Qin had resolutely chosen to marry into the Bai clan. At that time, she had indeed exchanged for a lot of money, which had helped the Yang clan for a period of time. Yang Qin had sacrificed so much, but her brothers and sisters didn't understand. Fortunately, Bai Peng and Yang Chendong had a good relationship, and they loved each other dearly. At the very least, he hadn't taken in a concubine yet. This had also gained Yang Chendong's approval. When it came to collecting goods in heavens beyond heaven, others couldn't, but the Bai clan had benefited greatly. And this time, Bai Peng had taken the initiative to come. Needless to say, he was here to discuss the imperial court's plan to collect the business tax. He had represented the majority of the merchants in the capital in coming to seek advice from Dong Shuai. He wanted to see if there was any good way to deal with it. Since his sixth brother-in-law had come, Yang Chendong naturally couldn't refuse to meet him. Not only did he meet him, he even met him in his own study. From this, one could see how solemn he was. Upon seeing Yang Chendong, even though he was his sixth brother-in-law, Bai Peng still respectfully greeted him. Duke Yang. All right, sixth brother-in-law, there's no need for you to call me Duke. Just call me Dong Shuai or sixth young master. Yang Chendong, who didn't like such formalities, chuckled and invited Bai Peng to sit across from him. All right, Dong Shuai. The imperial court's tax collection this time is clearly aimed at us merchants. With a ratio of 100 to 1, how much money will we have to pay in that year? We merchants are all opposed to it. Since they were relatives, there was no need to beat around the bush. Bai Peng raised the doubts in her heart. Yang Chendong savored the fragrant tea in his hand as he looked at Bai Peng. So they sent you here to make me stand up against the imperial court? Chapter 224. No! Seeing that Yang Chendong saw through his intention at a glance, Bai Peng hurriedly showed a flattering smile and said, "We don't want to go against the imperial court, but this move is too ruthless. As the leader of the merchants, Dong Shuai should represent us and argue with them." Hearing that he had become the leader of the merchants, a title that even he didn't know, Yang Chendong suddenly laughed and said, "Leader? Ha, a sixth brother-in-law, don't make fun of me. I am also the Duke of Loyalty and Courage personally conferred by the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty. I am also a minister of the imperial court. How can I find trouble with them?" It's not the same. Dong Shuai, who doesn't know that Walla retreated because of you, but now? They just conferred you the title of Duke and left you at home. This is clearly getting rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. We are all saying that it is unfair for Dong Shuai. Suddenly, the teacup was put on the table heavily. Enough. Yang Chendong's face suddenly turned cold and he said in an icy voice, "Sixth brother-in-law, this duke saw that you are my brother-in-law, so I gave you face and listened to you. However, there are some things that cannot be discussed in private. Well, I am sleepy, please go back." Yang Chendong made a gesture of sending him off, and then without waiting for Bai Peng to say anything, he got up and walked to the bedroom in the backyard. It was obvious that Bai Peng was being used by someone to ask him to speak for the merchants. If they won, the merchants would naturally get benefits. Even if they lost, the unlucky ones would only be him who resisted, and those people would still be fine. It was really unexpected that Bai Peng would be willing to do such a thing. Yang Chendong suddenly left the table, and Bai Peng's face was bitter. Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side, stretched out his hand and said politely, "Boss Bai, please." Bai Peng left with some disappointment. Not long after he returned to the capital, rumors began to spread that the newly made Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, was also afraid of the imperial court. Just like Zhang Fu, who had died for his country after being made Duke of Ying, he had become a coward. Even if someone went to the Yang Manor to ask for an explanation about the imperial court's business tax collection, he didn't dare to stand out and fight for it. Even Yang Chendong, who had an uncountable amount of silver, approved of the imperial court's actions. For a moment, the other merchants had nothing to say. They had no choice but to consider the matter of paying the taxes. Once the news came out, it quickly spread to the palace. When Jin Ying received the report from the secret agent of the Brocade Guard, she was overjoyed. "Ha, this Duke of Loyalty is a man of his word. He promised me before and he can fulfill his promise very well." However, in this way, his status in the eyes of the merchants will be greatly reduced. If there is a chance to take care of this person, I don't think there will be many people who will speak up for him. Jin Ying was overjoyed. At the same time, she waved her hand to summon a trusted eunuch and said, "Go, tell Commander Lu Gui that there are some things that can be taken care of." In a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the capital, weeds that were half the height of a man grew everywhere. Even though the weather was getting colder, the weeds still hadn't withered. They displayed their strong vitality. In the temple, weeds, and the occasional chirping of an unknown bird in the sky. This place gave off a desolate feeling. Logically speaking, there should be no signs of human habitation. However, 3 miles away from the temple, there were more than 100 people dressed in black. They were almost the same height. Their eyes were cold and indifferent. They were like human-shaped machines, without the slightest hint of emotion. They were the East Faction Guards. Because it was located to the north of Dong and Gate, now East Faction Alley in the north of Wangfujing Street, it was named the East Faction Guards. The function of the East Faction Guards was to investigate and defy evil and share power with the Embroidered Uniform Guards. Relatively speaking, the East Faction Guards and the Embroidered Uniform Guards didn't belong to each other. However, because the Embroidered Uniform Guards were established by Ming Qingzu and Zhu Di, and only those who weren't strong enough could enter, their overall quality was higher than the Embroidered Uniform Guards. Over time, they had a feeling that they were above the Embroidered Uniform Guards. Of course, the East Faction Guards couldn't order the Embroidered Uniform Guards around. Similarly, the Embroidered Uniform Guards couldn't order the East Faction Guards around. They each had their own authority and did different things that belonged to them. But this time, 100 East faction protectors had suddenly appeared. Such a big battle formation was just to besiege a rundown temple. From this, it could be seen that there must be someone important here. The 100 East faction guards dressed in black walked forward with light steps. They tried their best not to make any noise as they walked. However, there were too many people. With so many people, it was inevitable that they wouldn't make any noise. For example, one of them accidentally stepped on a withered branch and made a slight cracking sound. Once the sound was heard, the other guards nearby all looked over. Then, the leader shook his head. Although the sound was soft, it was equivalent to exposing the target of their encirclement. Attack together. Surround this place. Don't let him escape. After the leader called out softly, the 100 Eastern faction guards immediately sped up and formed a huge encirclement around the small temple. The 100 men in black stopped at almost the same time. They stared at the small temple in front of them that didn't make any noise. They didn't move for a long time. They stood there for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. When the atmosphere reached its peak, the leader raised his hand. A small crossbow appeared in the hands of all the men in black. They aimed at the only exit of the small temple. Lord Ji, you've already been surrounded. I know you have some tricks up your sleeve, but can you face 100 of us alone? If you don't come out, we'll have to set fire to the temple. The leader stared straight at the entrance of the small temple. During this process, he didn't even dare to blink. His voice spread out, and in the quiet little temple, it was very clear and bright. As his voice rang out, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the originally silent small temple. Chen Guan must have been unable to hold himself back and spilled the beans. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to find this place. His laughter was very bright and clear. In an instant it spread far and wide. When the leader of the black-robed men heard this, a faint smile appeared on his face. Chen Guan hadn't lied. Ji Guang really was here. Ji Guang, the former commander of the embroidered uniform guards, was a 4th-rank official. At the same time, he was Wang Zhen's trusted aide. Ever since Wang Zhen was killed in front of the Tuma Castle, Ji Guang had disappeared. Along with him, the money and wealth that Wang Zhen had obtained through various means over the years had disappeared. Jin Ying, who had regained power, didn't care that much about Ji Guang's disappearance. However, he couldn't accept the fact that the treasure had disappeared as well. It was the same at any time. If you wanted to succeed, you needed money first. Only when those who followed you benefited from it would more and more people would gather. Since Ji Guang had disappeared along with the treasures, no one would believe that they had nothing to do with it. If they found Ji Guang, they might be able to find out where the treasure was buried. For this matter, Jin Ying was very attentive. He even found a random reason to take down the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Chen Guan. Chen Guan was also one of Wang Zhen's trusted aides. He was also in charge of the Imperial Horse Directorate, a weapon of mass destruction. When he saw Jin Ying, the head eunuch of the Ceremony Directorate, he rarely looked him in the eye. However, all of this ended with Wang Zhen's death and Ying Zong's defeat. Jin Ying made the right choice at the first moment and relied on Zhu Qiu. Not long after, Zhu Qiu ascended the throne and Jin Ying held great power. He also obtained the mission of reorganizing the embroidered uniform guards of the Eastern faction guards and the entire group of eunuchs from Zhu Qiu. Once the power of the court was in his hands, all people submitted. Chen Guan was one of the eunuchs who changed his attitude very quickly. He immediately chose to pledge his loyalty to Jin Ying. Indeed, he disappeared from the list of eunuchs to be purged first. However, as Dai Zong's position became more and more stable, Jin Ying's power grew with each passing day. In the end, he was caught by Jin Ying. Chen Guan, who had been caught, couldn't understand. He had already offered up all his wealth and was only given a small courtyard in the capital. Why had he not been let go? However, only after entering the embroidered uniform guard's prison did he realize that he had been implicated. Jin Ying wanted to capture Ji Guang, but had no clues, so he had been brought here. When he had first entered the prison, Chen Guan had displayed a hint of stubbornness. He really hadn't said anything. This was how smart he was. He believed that if he said anything, it would mean his death. But when Jin Ying personally met with him in the prison, everything changed. Jin Ying promised that as long as Chen Guan told her where Ji Guang was hiding and he successfully found Wang Zhen's wealth, she would restore him to his position as head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. Not only would he be able to live, he would also be able to regain his lofty position and hold great power. Chen Guan had no choice but to seriously consider all of this. After an intense mental struggle, he finally revealed that Ji Guang might be hiding in a rundown temple on the outskirts of the capital. That place had originally been a secret meeting point. This was also one of Wang Zhen's cleverness. A crafty rabbit had 3 burrows. Wang Zhen had once worried that he would one day fall and be targeted, so he had a place to hide. The temple appeared to be in ruins, but it had actually been remodeled underground. Not only could it hide people, it had also prepared a lot of food. It could guarantee that one wouldn't have to worry about survival for a month or even longer. After receiving this news, the operation at the Eastern Faction headquarters took place. As expected, they found the former commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Ji Guang. Chapter 225. Ji Guang took the initiative to step forward. The East Faction protector walked forward and tied him up tightly. Regarding this, Ji Guang did not resist at all from beginning to end. Wang Zhen had put him in an important position, so he was very skilled. Usually, 5 or 6 big men would not be able to get close to him. However, this time, he was facing 100 East Faction protectors. If he had to fight, he would undoubtedly be looking for trouble. Moreover, Ji Guang had been hiding for a long time. Perhaps it would be a relief if someone found him. The small temple was searched carefully. However, other than some food and water, nothing else was found. In the end, only he was secretly brought to the imperial prison. When Jin Ying heard the news that Ji Guang had been captured, she came to the imperial prison. She saw Ji Guang, who seemed to be in a good mood, chatting with Chen Guan, who had surrendered. "Hee, the 2 of you, I didn't expect that the 3 of us would meet again here. Are you surprised?" Jin Ying said this because she was feeling emotional. In the past, when Wang Zhen was still around, they actually had many opportunities to meet. However, because their standpoints were different and Jin Ying's performance was very mediocre, it was difficult for her to be taken seriously. Chen Guan and Ji Guang did not speak. They did not know how to respond. Jin Ying did not mind. Instead, she continued to enlighten them. Perhaps this is how the affairs of the world change. Yesterday you were high and mighty. Today you may become a prisoner. Therefore, the most important thing is to enjoy the best time and recognize the situation. Your former master, Wang Zhen, is already dead. Perhaps he has already gone to hell. There is no need for you to follow him because there is still a bright future and good days ahead of you. How about it? Follow me. As long as you become my people, no one will make things difficult for you in the future. Jin Ying spoke in a bewitching tone. If others want to follow me, they have to think of many ways to achieve it. However, I have high hopes for the 2 of you. I am willing to take the initiative and give you a chance. As long as you tell me where Wang Zhen's treasures are hidden, you will naturally be reinstated. Isn't that the best? Of course, you can also choose not to say anything and continue to be loyal to your deceased former master. If that's the case, you won't have an easy life for the rest of your lives. I don't think there's a need for me to continue explaining to you what the imperial prison has to offer. If you want, you can have a taste of the 108 types of torture. Sticks and candy. Chen Guan's expression changed when he saw the 2 extreme techniques. Although Ji Guang didn't show anything on the surface, he was also conflicted in his heart. All of them had once held great power in their hands. It was precisely because of this that they had enjoyed wonderful things. Now that they had lost them, that feeling was the most painful. It had to be said that Jin Ying understood people's weaknesses too well. After saying this, he didn't immediately force them to make a choice. Instead, he laughed and left. After he left, there were still people who served them good wine and dishes, treating them like VIPs. This was one of Jin Ying's methods. Using sugar-coated bullets to bombard these 2 people and let them see the beauty of life. This way, their will to die would become weaker and weaker, and in the end, they would be used by him. In the immortal abode of the capital, the emergency production of the War Walla play had already begun. Madame Shui and Madame Xiang had personally witnessed how Yang Chendong had killed all his enemies with a wave of his finger. Naturally, it was much easier to arrange the plot. That was why the plot could be arranged in such a short time and presented in front of everyone. Yang Chendong had defeated the powerful Walla army. Everyone in the capital knew about this, and even a child of 2 or 3 years old would remember the name of the Dong Shui. But as for the exact details, many people didn't know. Now that the play had been produced, everyone finally understood what had happened. Madame Shui and Madame Xiang had intentionally added in a few mythological elements, making the play even more entertaining and allowing even more people to understand the power and mystery of the Duke of Loyalty. With the play, the Immortal Abode, which had already been a difficult place to obtain, became even more popular. In order to catch a glimpse of the war god, some high officials and nobles even offered several times the market price just to get a seat. This flattery made Yang Chendong's limelight unparalleled for a while. Outside the Yang clan manor, an endless stream of young people came to join him every day. These people had come to join Yang Chendong after watching the War God Battle Walla play. In their eyes, the Duke of Loyalty was a great hero. Good men should follow in the footsteps of such a person, so that they wouldn't have wasted their lives. Outside the manor, people would come to join him every day, willingly renouncing their original identities to join Yang Chendong, even if it was just a servant. But Yang Chendong didn't accept any of this. If he wanted to develop, he naturally couldn't do without people. There were indeed many men who were knowledgeable and had good physical fitness among those who sought refuge from Yang Chendong. However, Yang Chendong did not want any of them. For no other reason than the fact that he didn't know much about these people. Who knew if some of them were spies sent by Dai Zong or Evening Zone? Even though there weren't many secrets in the Yang clan manor, Yang Chendong didn't want to waste his energy on guarding against the people around him. He still had too many things to do, such as arranging for Teng Shan to escort goods to the Walla. After meeting with Yes Hen last time, they decided on an important matter of trade. Now that the Walla's army had retreated from the Ming dynasty's territory, the matter of trade naturally began. The only difference was that the ones in charge this time were the mercenaries led by Teng Shan. First of all, the mercenaries didn't have to pay taxes to Zhu Qiu. Even Jin Ying and the others didn't have the guts to collect taxes, but the amount of money involved was still considerable. Second of all, not only did Teng Shan want to trade with the Walla, but he also wanted to take the opportunity to observe the geography of the grasslands and draw a map. One day, when the battle was decided, all of this would be of great use. Thirdly, in order for the Yang faction's new army to become an invincible cavalry army, they would need more war horses. And if one wanted to buy and sell war horses, the grasslands were undoubtedly the cheapest and most reasonable. With these 3 points, Teng Shan had already started to prepare for trade with the Walla. Since it was trade, the escorts had to be on the ground. The main thing was that the merchant caravan was large. And Yang Chendong was using the Bai clan's merchant caravan. Since the last time Bai Peng wanted to ask Yang Chendong to come forward on behalf of the merchants in the capital but failed to do so, the next day, Yang Qin, the sixth sister, brought her husband, Bai Peng, to Yang village to ask for forgiveness. Bai Peng had been drinking with the merchants and was picked up, so he volunteered to come to the Yang clan manor. However, Yang Chendong very calmly rejected him. After that, Bai Peng was naturally ridiculed by the merchants. When he returned home, he was seen by his wife, Yang Qin, and told her the whole story. When Yang Qin found out about the situation, she immediately infuriated her husband. This was the first time the virtuous Yang Qin had publicly questioned her husband. At that time, Bai Peng was naturally very angry. He was actually looked down upon by a woman, which made him feel like he had lost all face. However, after listening to his wife's words, he realized that he had been used. If he went to find Yang Chendong, he would be viewed as an enemy by the great Ming dynasty. This was a win-win situation. On the other hand, his friends who drank with him could be exempted from the tax and save a lot of money. Knowing that he had been used and, more importantly, he had offended the Duke of Loyalty, Bai Peng was filled with regret. The next morning he came to the Yang clan manor with his wife. Since sixth sister had come forward, Yang Chendong had to meet her. Not only that, Yang Chendong also expressed his position and gave enough face to sixth sister and gave enough benefits to the Bai family. Yang Chendong said, "Sixth sister, sixth brother-in-law, as a merchant, you are protected by the country, so you should pay taxes to the country for your original interests. Otherwise, the country is unstable. How can you do stable business? So paying taxes is normal and even necessary." It must be said that this was not Yang Chendong's noble character, but his sincere words. Not for other reasons, but because the merchants in Xichen City had to pay taxes, and the tax paid was far higher than the ratio of 100 to 1, but within the range of 50 to 1, referring to the profit. Even so, there were still countless people who went to the newly established tax bureau to apply for a business license every day. So it could be seen that the benefits were still very big. Xichen City was still too small, and the taxes of the merchants would not be of much use to the rapidly growing Xianxia faction. But in the long run, it was all worth it. Think about it. In the future, the territory that they occupy will increase, the population will increase, and there will be more businesses. At that time, the business tax will play a huge role. With such thoughts, how could he not support Zhu Qiu's decision to collect taxes? At the very least, he had to let the people here get used to it first. As for himself, he had to pay what should be paid, and what he could avoid was best. No matter what, Bai Peng was his sixth brother-in-law, and more importantly, the Bai family had some status among the merchants in the capital. In order to build a strong system, or even a country, not only did they need an army that could fight tough battles, they also needed to recruit all kinds of talents. As such, Yang Chendong decided to pull in the Bai family. While sixth sister and sixth brother-in-law were here, he told them that the mercenaries wanted to trade with the Walla, and that they needed to hire a large merchant caravan. "I've decided to recommend the Bai family's merchant caravan. Is there any problem?" Chapter 226. Can we? Bai Peng was very excited when he heard this. He even looked at his wife, Yang Qin, with a grateful expression. Normal merchants would not have the guts to trade with the Walla. It was rumored that the Walla were murderous people who would raise their sabers at the slightest disagreement. Doing business with them was like risking one's life to earn money. However, it depended on the person. The same thing was different when it came to the mercenaries. As the battle between the war god and the Walla spread throughout the capital, other than remembering the great hero, Yang Chendong, they also remembered the mercenaries. This was an army with few people but with advanced firearms. It was said that each of them could fight against 100 people. When they faced the Walla army, they could easily crush the enemy. There were also people who said that when Tumu was defeated, it was these mercenaries who saved Ingzong and the 9 important officials of the country. As the discussions became more and more intense, people started to worship the mercenaries blindly. It was as if this army was omnipotent. Now, it was these powerful mercenaries who wanted to do business with the Walla people. The Bai family was just hitching a ride. This was a great thing. Imagine, while transporting goods for the mercenaries, wouldn't the Bai family also be able to bring some goods to sell to the Walla people? How big of a market would that be? The more he thought about it, the more excited Bai Peng became. When he looked at Yang Chendong, his eyes were filled with gratitude. "All right, we're all family. There's no need to say any more words of thanks. This matter can be settled like this. As for the specific details, such as the amount of goods needed and the number of carriages needed, sixth brother-in-law can discuss it with my cousin Yang Fu." Yang Chendong had a confident smile on his face. As he spoke, he winked at his sixth sister, Yang Qin, with a mischievous look. Yang Qin was also amused by her little brother's performance. In fact, she was even happier. This was clearly her little brother helping the Bai clan. "All right, I'll have to thank sixth brother this time. I won't say anything else. In the future, the Bai clan will definitely follow sixth brother's lead in business. Yes, we're all family in the future. Our Bai clan will listen to Dong Shuai. Bai Peng also hurriedly expressed his stance. We're family after all. Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He knew that with the help of the Bai clan, business would be much easier in the future. After his sixth sister and sixth brother-in-law left, Yang Chendong's mood became very good. However, everything was ruined because of a report sent from the bureau. According to the information provided by the bureau, Wang Zhen's trusted aide, Qin Guan, was first imprisoned by Jin Ying for a random reason. Not long after, Wang Zhen's other trusted aide, Ji Guang, was also found in a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the city. Now, both of them were imprisoned. An insider reported that Jin Ying had just gone to the prison to meet the two of them. As for what exactly they talked about, it would take time to find out. Looking at this piece of fresh information, Yang Chendong threw it on the desk. Inform the bureau to investigate all the eunuchs and brocade guard officials who originally belonged to Wang Zhen and have defected to Jin Ying. Find out the pattern of their activities. Tiger's Mane saw that the sixth young master seemed to be a little angry. He nodded in agreement and left. When there was no one else in the room, Yang Chendong looked at the report in his hand and gently shook his head. It's best that you don't provoke me. Otherwise, I guarantee that you'll regret it. Yang Chendong had a premonition that once Jin Ying grasped power, she would come to make trouble for him. However, he hadn't expected things to happen so quickly. 5 days later, just as Tingshan had left the capital with a company of Lung Feng and a caravan of 300 carriages from the Bai clan and was heading in the direction of the Walla, 2 unexpected guests arrived at the Yang clan manor that afternoon. These 2 were Qin Guan and Ji Guang. After spending 2 days in the imperial prison, the 2 of them had finally thought it through. Rather than being loyal to a dead person, it was better to live on and enjoy the temptations and beauty of the world. They had chosen to join Jin Ying. As a sign of their loyalty, they had taken out all the treasures that Wang Zhen had hidden away when he left the capital and handed them over. A rough estimate put the value of the silver and the items together at nearly 5 million taels of silver. From this, one could see just how much money he usually had. And this didn't even include the deeds to the houses and lands. Among these contracts was the one that Wang Zhen had signed with Yang Chendong. He had invested 2 million taels of silver into the Immortal abode, and after 1 year, he would receive a one-time dividend of 2,500,000 taels. He would then receive a minimum of 200,000 taels of silver each month. It was written that as long as the Immortal abode and heaven beyond heaven continued to operate, this contract would remain in effect. Jin Ying was naturally overjoyed to receive such an enormous fortune. When she saw the contract between Wang Zhen and Yang Chendong, she immediately had an idea. She first reinstated Qin Guan as the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate and Ji Guang as the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Then, she arranged for the 2 of them to ask Yang Chendong for money. After nearly a year, the Immortal abode had become the most popular restaurant in the capital. Countless customers lined up outside every day, so one could imagine how popular the restaurant was. Now was the time for this contract to take effect. Chen Guan and Ji Guang went to a side hall of the Yang clan manor. Compared to before, they were much more respectful today. If not for Jin Ying's urging, they wouldn't even have wanted to make this trip. Yang Chendong was no longer the same person as before. Although he had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, his status was completely different from when he had first arrived. He was now the Duke of Loyal and Gallant, holding the title of Duke. Most importantly, he had a mercenary army that could strike fear into the hearts of the Walla. It was precisely because of this that Qin Guan and Ji Guang had chosen to come today. This was because a group of 100 mercenaries had just left for the Walla this morning. At this time, only 100 mercenaries were left in the capital. Some of them were stationed at the Yang Clan Bank, Heaven Beyond Heaven, and Immortal abode. The true number of mercenaries in the Yang clan manor was only 30. Sensing that Yang Chendong's strength was at its weakest, the 2 of them decided to go to the Yang clan manor. After handing over their visiting cards, they went to a side hall in the outer courtyard to wait. In the side hall were 4 other Cold Front brothers dressed in camouflage uniforms. They stood in pairs, their eyes fixed on Qin Guan and Ji Guang. A tense and oppressive aura permeated the room. Ji Guang had won Wang Zhen's trust not only because of his loyalty, but also because he was one of the strongest members of the embroidered uniform guard. However, even he didn't have the slightest chance of victory when facing the two Lung Feng who were staring at him. Time passed like this, minute by minute, second by second. After an entire hour, Yang Chendong still did not appear. But Chen Guan and Ji Guang were already drenched in cold sweat. They truly couldn't understand how these mercenary brothers had managed to remain motionless for an hour, only keeping a close eye on their movements. Were they not tired? They naturally didn't know that the most basic requirement for cold front soldiers was to train their posture. It was often possible for them to stand there for an entire morning, or even longer. Not to mention that it had only been an hour. But no matter who it was, if they were stared at for an hour, they would feel their hair stand on end. Just as the two of them were wondering if they should leave first and come back another day, Yang Chendong, dressed in green, yawned as he walked into the side hall, accompanied by Tiger's Mane on his left and Beta Persei on his right. As soon as they entered the hall, Yang Chendong said politely, "Ayaya, I slept too deeply. I heard that you've been here for an hour. I'm really sorry." Although he said he was sorry, he didn't seem to be sorry at all. Yang Chendong sat down on the chair at the head of the table, then drank the fragrant tea brought by Tiger's Mane and asked casually, "You two just came out of the imperial prison. I haven't congratulated you yet. Sigh, if eunuch Wang was still here, I'm sure you wouldn't have to suffer like this." The moment he came up, he brought up the matter of the two of them in prison and even mentioned Wang Zhen's name. Chen Guan and Ji Guang's expressions turned ugly. Now that they had sided with Jin Ying, it was tantamount to betraying Wang Zhen. If someone said the name of the previous owner in front of you, no matter who it was, their expression wouldn't be good. Their expressions were ugly. They knew that Yang Chendong was disgusting them, but they couldn't vent their anger. Was the Duke of Loyalty so easy to offend? Especially when there were 6 burly men staring at them. They were afraid that if they did anything extreme, they would walk out of here in one piece. Their expressions were ugly, and their hearts were filled with unwillingness. But since they were here, they had to get down to business. After Qin Guan gave Ji Guang a look, a contract was delivered to Yang Chendong. "Duke Yang, take a look at this first." The contract was delivered to Tiger's Mane first, then placed in front of Yang Chendong. Putting down the teacup in his hand, Yang Chendong looked at the contract curiously, then laughed. "This Wang Zhen, he's still playing this game with me. Back then, he clearly said that the contract was lost. Now, he suddenly appeared. Is he trying to act shamelessly? Huh." He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to Chen Guan and Ji Guang. Then, in front of the two of them, he tore the contract into pieces. This action frightened Chen Guan and Ji Guang. The two of them seemed to instinctively stand up. Following their movements, the 4 men who had been watching them closely also took a few steps forward and came to their side. From the looks of it, if they dared to do anything extreme, they would immediately attack. Chapter 227. "Duke Yang? What do you think you're doing?" Chen Guan asked angrily. This was clearly a scoundrel trying to deny the debt. Although Ji Guang didn't say anything, his tightly clenched fists were enough to express his anger and dissatisfaction. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, acted as if he didn't see anything. He smiled and shook his head. "Please don't take offense. My guild will give you an explanation for this matter. Tiger's Mane, go to my study and bring me the contract with Wang Zhen's handprint." Tiger's Mane nodded and left to carry out his orders. Chen Guan and Ji Guang couldn't help but glance at each other, a trace of surprise in their eyes. They didn't understand what that handprint contract meant. However, when Tiger's Mane returned and Yang Chendong placed a contract with his handprint on it in front of them, they understood what was going on. The contract was a receipt. It said that Wang Zhen was in urgent need of money due to the upcoming battle with the Walla, so he took 2,500,000 taels of silver from the Immortal abode in advance. Because of the breach of the contract, the Immortal abode's income would have nothing to do with him in the future. There was no writing on the contract, only a bright red handprint. In other words, with this receipt, Yang Chendong and Wang Jin no longer had any debts. Do you two see this? Before I left for the Walla, eunuch Wang came to me and said that he was in urgent need of money. He also said that he couldn't find the contract he had written with me, so he sent me this receipt. It also has his handprint on it. Yang Chendong's voice was still echoing in the side hall, but Chen Guan shook his head firmly. That's impossible. This eunuch has never heard of such a thing. That's right. Even if there was such a thing, eunuch Wang would have left behind a signature and not just a handprint, Ji Guang said confidently. No wonder they thought this way. It was just a handprint. How could they be sure that Wang Jin had left it behind when he was already dead? Seeing their suspicious expressions, Yang Chendong was displeased. He said sternly, "What? Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean that it won't happen? As for why eunuch Wang only pressed his fingerprint and didn't sign it, you should ask him. I'll say it again. I've already given the silver to Wang Jin and the matter has long been settled. What's the meaning of you suddenly bringing out the original contract? Do you think I'm a pushover? If that's the case, you can go ahead and sue me." With an angry look, Yang Chendong suddenly stood up, flicked his sleeves, and left the side hall, accompanied by the burly Beta Persei. Sue! Chen Guan and Ji Guang were in the mood to curse. Even the contract had been completely torn apart. What could he use to sue? It was clear that Yang Chendong didn't want to return the money and made him feel wronged. Originally, he knew that the debt collection this time would not go smoothly. But now, it seemed that it was not only not going smoothly, it was simply looking for a nail to nail and asking for humiliation. As for Yang Chendong, he didn't have the slightest intention of putting them in his eyes. With their status, they would make people tremble wherever they went. Even if they went to the homes of important officials, they would be treated like distinguished guests. But when they came to the Yang Manor, they couldn't even enter the main hall. In the early Ming dynasty, it was the Wuing Hall and Wenhua Hall who assisted the emperor in reviewing memorials and acted as advisors. The Ming dynasty's Emperor Zhu Di also allowed the cabinet officials to participate in government affairs, but they were not allowed to control the officials. Starting from Mingren Sec's Zhu Gaoqi, he used the 6 ministers directly under him. Because of Yang Chendong, now that there were 2 emperors ruling together, the court officials were scattered, causing the cabinet to be severely lacking in personnel. Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect and Zhu Qiyu of the Dai sect had simply abandoned the cabinet and placed important positions in the 6 ministries and the group of eunuchs. This was a place that was different from history. But because of this, the power of the eunuch group became more and more important. But even so, in front of Yang Chendong, they were still repeatedly rebuffed. Even now, they lacked basic respect. Just like now, after waiting for Yang Chendong to leave the side hall, Tiger's Mane looked at Chen Guan and Ji Guang angrily and said, "The 2 of you, please." Preposterous. Seeing that the other party was going to drive them away, Ji Guang finally couldn't hold it in anymore. After a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes, he suddenly reached out to grab Tiger's Mane's neck. Like a giant eagle stretching out its claws, he went straight for the throat. Previously, Ji Guang had been hiding in the ruined temple for a long time and had been sullen for a long time. Now that he was finally restored to his official position, he could finally show his strength. Now, he was treated so lightly by a duke with no real power, and even a servant dared to shout at him. How could he bear it? Ji Guang, who was angry, finally couldn't hold it in and exploded. His arm was like a long snake. Under the sudden explosion, there seemed to be a popping sound in the air as he grabbed at the air. "Come at me." Facing this sudden attack, Tiger's Mane wasn't afraid. Instead, he was happy and calm. With a loud laugh, his body suddenly leaned back. With his feet as the axis, his whole body leaned back. Although he was leaning backwards, he did not fall down. Instead, he was like a roly-poly toy. When he fell down, he spun around and stood firm again. At the same time, he threw a heavy punch forward like a tiger stirring up wind. Ji Guang had the idea of striking first to gain the upper hand. He threw a quick punch in order to vent the anger in his heart and also to remind Yang Chendong that he, an embroidered uniform guard, wasn't so easy to deal with. He had real skills. Never would he have thought that his punch would hit nothing but air. When he didn't hit the target, his body naturally leaned forward. At this time, Tiger's mane threw a heavy punch back. As expected of an expert in the embroidered uniform guard, Ji Guang's reaction was very fast. When he saw the heavy punch in front of him, his body quickly retreated. In the eyes of others, the punch was close to the chest. It seemed like it could hit at any time, but it was always just a little bit off. Ji Guang kept retreating while Tiger's mane kept chasing. This situation continued until Ji Guang's body leaned back to a certain extent. Until Tiger's mane used up all the strength in his punch, there was still a distance of 2 centimeters between them. At this moment, the two of them had already stood still and maintained a somewhat ambiguous aura. Ji Guang's body leaned back and Tiger's mane's body leaned forward, so that the distance between their eyes was less than 50 centimeters. Hee. It seemed like the fight had ended. While Ji Guang was still secretly shocked by the strength of the Yang family servants, he suddenly saw a strange smile on Tiger's mane's face. This smile made Ji Guang's heart sink. He instinctively had a bad feeling. As soon as he sensed it, he saw Tiger Light's fist, which was about to hit Ji Guang's chest, suddenly turn into a palm. At the same time, it lengthened by 2 centimeters and stabbed into Ji Guang's heart like a sharp blade. Ji Guang suddenly felt a sharp pain. Then, the pain became stronger and stronger until his whole body bent into the shape of a prawn. He was completely tangled up. "You let me win, you let me win." In this exchange, Ji Guang suffered a great loss. He retreated, his face extremely pale. However, the 2 members of the Cold Blade Division who had been staring at him didn't have any intention of letting him go. They stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right. They clenched their fists and looked like they were going to teach him a lesson. He actually dared to make the first move under their watch. This was a provocation to them. Forget it, forget it. He has already learned his lesson. Of course, if he dares to make a move for no reason next time, we will have to beat him up again and hand him over to you to deal with. Tiger's mane took advantage of the situation and stopped the 2 members of the Cold Blade Division. However, his words were full of sarcasm. He couldn't beat them in a fight, and he wasn't competitive in scaring them. Moreover, he didn't have a handle on them. Chen Guan analyzed that there was no point in staying here. "All right, Ji Xianxia, let's go." However, as the saying goes, the mountains will not change and the rivers will flow forever. Let's wait and see. No matter what, he was still the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He was used to being high and mighty. Now that he had been slapped in the face, it was in line with his personality to leave behind such harsh words. If it were anyone else, hearing such a threat, even if they didn't tremble in fear, their expression would have changed greatly. However, in Tiger's mane's eyes, he laughed out loud in a completely different manner. As the saying goes, the mountains will not change. In that case, let's wait and see. I only hope that Eunuch Chen won't regret it. This duke has never known what regret is. Chen Guan angrily reprimanded Tiger's mane, his face full of indignation. When these words came out, Tiger's mane's face was also full of anger. "Eunuch Chen, you're just a eunuch. Please remember your status. You can call yourself an eunuch, but you can't call yourself an eunuch. Otherwise, you'll have to pay a heavy price." Haha. As if he had found a way to turn the tables, Chen Guan laughed out loud. "My apologies, this duke is already used to calling myself an eunuch. I'm afraid I can't change it." Yeah. Chen Guan pulled Ji Guang, who had been punched, away and left Yang Manor. However, as soon as they left the manor, he changed from his earlier laughing expression to that of Ji Guang. "Ji Xianxia, this time we messed up our mission. I'm afraid that Eunuch Jean won't be too happy. What should we do?" Daring to hurt a member of our embroidered uniform guard, this loyal eunuch is clearly audacious. Next, this official will let them know that there are some things that they can't do, or even think about. "Don't worry, I'll make arrangements when I get back." Ji Guang's face was full of anger, but he couldn't be blamed for his actions. Tiger's mane's punch just now wasn't light. If it weren't for his superb martial arts skills, it was possible that he would have lost half his life. "All right, if you need this duke's cooperation, just let me know," Chen Guan said angrily. It was obvious that at this moment, he hated Yang Chendong to the bone. Chapter 228. Yang Manor. Tiger's Mane came to Yang Chendong's study and recounted what had just happened, as well as the harsh words Qin Guan had said before he left. Young master, they're too arrogant. I really regret that I only used 60% of my strength in that punch. I should have used more strength and left Ji Guang here. Yang Chendong shook his head. No matter what, the other party is still the commander of the Brocade Guards, a dignified fourth-rank official. If we kill him here, it'll be hard to explain to the outside world. But they've already left Yang Manor. Yang Chendong, who looked displeased, snorted coldly. Walla had just retreated not long ago and had just reached an agreement with Jin Ing. The two of them had not interfered with each other's business. Who would have thought that he would come looking for trouble so soon? This time, it was true that he wanted the silver, but more importantly, he wanted to test his reaction. Since that was the case, he couldn't disappoint. Didn't you want to see my reaction? Then I'll let you know what the consequences of offending Yang Manor are. Tiger's Mane, make the arrangements immediately and act according to the plan. But remember, you have to act appropriately. You can't kill anyone. You have to let some people know what it means to live a life worse than death. Yang Chendong gave the order, and Tiger's Mane's eyes immediately lit up. Please rest assured, young master. I'll go inform them and make the arrangements personally. After saying this, Tiger's Mane turned to leave, but unfortunately, Yang Chendong's voice came from behind him. You don't have to go. Arrange for someone to inform Yang San. It'll be a good opportunity to test the actual combat ability of the newly established operation team of your security bureau. All right, after you're done, tell the people in the manor that in an hour, this young master will take the ladies to Chicken Crow Mountain for a tour. You and Beta Persei can't be absent. Yang Chendong naturally knew that Tiger's Mane wanted to do it himself. He could understand this feeling, but now was not the time to turn hostile. An appropriate warning was fine, but he still understood the principle of overdoing it. At the very least, the people who are always around him must be cleared of suspicion during the operation. Tiger's Mane's face, which was originally full of excitement, immediately turned bitter. He knew that the possibility of warming up was gone. However, since this was an order from the young master, he naturally wouldn't go against it. He lowered his head and complied. An hour later, Yang Chendong brought Hu Yen and Xiao Yin as well as a platoon of Lingfeng brothers, as well as Qiu Vi's first squad, and headed straight for Chicken Crow Mountain. On this trip, there were more than 10 carriages loaded with goods. It could be seen that Yang Chendong was prepared to stay for a while. In the capital, Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San received an order from the Yang family manor. Beside him stood the captain of the Ghost Sniper Squad, Bai Zua, and an unfamiliar man with cold eyes. Haha, the young master is finally going to make a move. This is our Ghost Sniper Squad's chance to show off. After receiving the order, Bai Zua's face lit up with joy. He seemed to have seen another addition to his list of achievements. However, as the person directly carrying out the order, Yang San didn't show anything on his face. He also ignored Bai Zua's excitement. Instead, he looked at the unfamiliar man and said, Captain Tai, what do you think? Captain Tai, full name Tai Hu, was the captain of Yang Xie's new army, the Wolf Fang Special Forces. The Wolf Fang Special Forces was a special squad formed under the special request of Yang Chendong. They were used to carry out any special tasks. There weren't many of them, only 20 of them. However, every one of them was carefully selected from the elite members of the Cold Vanguard. They were capable, well-equipped, agile, well-trained, and strong in combat. Regardless of whether it was reconnaissance, assassination, camouflage, or firearms, they were all very skilled. Such a squad was also one of Yang Chendong's trump cards. If the Ghost Sniper Squad was said to be able to take people's lives from a distance, then the Wolf Fang Special Forces was the trump card in close combat. Yang Chendong, who had exposed some of his strength, had already given an order to Qiqian City to let the Wolf Fang Special Forces rush to the capital. This time, in order to give a warning to the unit group, he temporarily lent them to Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San so that they could complete the task better. As soon as they arrived, they were temporarily assigned to the operation team of the Security Bureau. According to Yang Chendong's intention, They would be separated after training more outstanding talents. Tai Hu, who was named, answered without hesitation when asked what he thought of this matter. The sixth young master's words are orders. It is an order that must be completed. Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San, please give the task to us. We will definitely give you a surprise tonight. Okay, I believe in Captain Tai. If you have any ideas, just do it. If you need our cooperation, please let us know. My security bureau and the Ghost Sniper Squad will fully cooperate with you. Yang San's voice came out immediately. Since Yang Chendong attached so much importance to this matter, Yang San of course had to perform well. This was also the first appearance of the Wolf Fang Special Forces since its establishment. It was time for them to show their skills. Nanqing district of the capital. There were many ancient courtyards here. Most of these courtyards belonged to the royal family, so many of them were eventually occupied by eunuchs. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. With the emperor's trust, the eunuchs were powerful, they acted on behalf of the emperor, and they were awe-inspiring. In one of the courtyards, a beardless man in brocade clothes was resting in a small pavilion in the courtyard. Although this person looked ordinary and was not tall enough, in fact, he was a eunuch leader with real power. He was in charge of more than 30 eunuchs. And with his position, he was qualified to have the right to live outside. When he was not on duty, he would go back to his small courtyard to enjoy himself. He abandoned the servile appearance in the palace and bowed to everyone. He enjoyed the feeling of being the master. Two delicate-looking maids brought a fruit plate and tea to the small pavilion and served the eunuch. He squinted his eyes happily as he enjoyed himself. This was the life of a superior person. This was the dream he should pursue. Just as he was enjoying his beautiful life, the eunuch, who had just closed his eyes, felt that his surroundings were quiet. That kind of silence gave him a creepy feeling. Instinctively, he wanted to open his eyes to see what was going on. Just as he had this thought, a cold chill came from his neck. Although he still did not open his eyes, his perception had told him that there should be a sharp and cold dagger on his neck. Don't even think about opening your eyes. Otherwise, the moment you see my face, it will be the moment you meet the King of Hell. A cold and indifferent voice suddenly sounded in his ear. This voice made the eunuch's body tremble. The smooth and slick side of his bones was also revealed. Brother, I won't open my eyes. Please don't hurt me. Tell me, what do you want? Is it silver? I don't have much, but it is enough for ordinary people to live a peaceful life. Pooh. Just as he finished speaking, there was a sudden pain in his right arm. The eunuch could not help but open his mouth and howl. However, the coldness that had just left returned to his neck. You can scream, but before they arrive, I guarantee that the first person to die will be you. But I won't scream. When he felt the killing intent, the eunuch became very obedient. Pooh! Another knife stabbed into his left arm. The eunuch almost could not help but scream. Although he controlled his voice because of the fear of death, his whole body could not help but twist. He really could not understand. Why did the other party stab him twice without any request? Could it be that this was not for money, but because he had offended someone and was here to seek revenge? Fortunately, the answer came out quickly. He heard the voice in his ear. You better remember, you can call yourself this eunuch in the future, but you must not call yourself this eunuch to save trouble. Otherwise, next time, I won't just hurt your arms, I will directly take your life. Remember. The cold voice was still echoing in his mind, but the eunuch's mind was already at a loss. He really couldn't figure out what was going on. Could it be that the other party wanted to kill him because of a title? What kind of logic was this? How was this possible? If this matter was told to him by someone else, it would be hard to believe. But now, the real thing was happening to him. Moreover, the piercing pain under his arms made him want to twitch uncontrollably. Everything was so real that it couldn't be faked. So what was going on? Village Gazing Pavilion. This was one of the most famous restaurants in the capital. Before the rise of the Immortal abode, no one would have doubted that this was one of the 10 great restaurants of the capital. But now, this place had fallen into decline. But even though it had declined, It had once been prosperous. One could still see its former glory here, and it could still attract nostalgic customers. Ji Guang was one of them. Before Yang Chendong had come to the capital, before the Immortal abode, Ji Guang had been a frequent customer here. Because of his generosity, the proprietress of this restaurant had treated him with special treatment. But because this woman already had a man, Ji Guang did not do anything excessive out of respect for the sake of morality and etiquette. Until recently, it was rumored that the Walla's army might break into the capital, and business there was already difficult. The proprietress of the village gazing pavilion left for Nanjing, but his wife did not. In her words, the village gazing pavilion was her life. Even if she had to die, she would die here. Their opinions differed, and the result was a peaceful divorce. The woman bought the village gazing pavilion with silver and kept it. Chapter 229. A while ago, Ji Guang had been hiding in the ruined temple and had no idea what was going on in the outside world. This time, after pledging allegiance to Jin Ying, he finally regained his freedom. Tonight, he appeared here and saw Li Xiu, the woman who still had some charm and had feelings for him. In the private room, Li Xiu boldly confided her feelings to Ji Guang. She also said that as a divorced woman, she did not ask to be a bride. As long as Ji Guang was willing to come and see her often, she would be satisfied. This kind of attitude and idea of being a mistress was very advanced in this era. It also made Ji Guang very touched. However, he did not immediately agree. According to his thinking, although his position seemed to be high and powerful, he didn't know how many people were watching him. If he wasn't careful, he didn't know where he would lose his life. He couldn't give Li Xiu any sense of security. He did not agree. When Ji Guang left the village pavilion, although he did not look back, it was as if he had eyes in the back of his head. He could feel that Li Xiu was heartbroken and tearful. Hardening his heart, Ji Guang did not look back. He walked out of the village pavilion and came to the street. At this time, it was already the curfew time and the street was very deserted. However, as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Xianxia naturally did not have to worry about being interrogated by the military office of the 5 cities. He was still thinking about Li Xiu and walking alone on the quiet street. Suddenly, a bone-chilling feeling spread throughout his body. An instinct made him stop abruptly and reach out to touch his waist out of habit. Ji Guang's reaction was very fast. With his sixth sense, he sensed the danger in advance. It was a pity that he was facing Tai Hu, the captain of the Langya Special Forces. Tai Hu originally wanted to make a move on Qingguan, but the Security Bureau's intelligence showed that this person would not come out of the palace tonight. Therefore, he settled for the next best thing and chose Ji Guang. He heard that this person had some skills and wanted to learn from him. Tai Hu, who suddenly appeared, did not wait for Ji Guang to draw his sword. He slashed at him first. A piece of hair fell down from the tip and fluttered to the ground. Ji Guang's face was already ghastly pale. He knew that it was not that his opponent's saber technique was not good enough, but that he had done it intentionally. If his opponent had wanted to take his life, he would have been a dead man by now. Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Do we have any grudges? Ji Guang stared at the other's eyes in the dark and asked nervously. Cut the crap and draw your blade. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. You'll understand how laughable your little bit of martial power is in front of a true expert. Tai Hu had no intention of revealing his identity. Today, not only did he want to hurt Ji Guang and make him pay for what he did during the day, he also wanted to instill fear in his heart so that he would never dare to go against the 6th young master again. Ji Guang was also an experienced and knowledgeable person who had experienced many trials of life and death. Naturally, he could tell that the other party had no intention of talking nonsense with him. Confident in his saber skills, he drew his saber with a clang and pointed it at Tai Hu. All right, let this official see just how strong you are. Ignorant. Seeing Ji Guang draw his saber, Tai Hu's eyes flashed with contempt. He was one of the earliest members of the Cold Front. Because of his ruthlessness and decisiveness, he was admired by Yang Chendong and was given a saber technique for close combat. This saber technique was not flashy, but every move was fatal. It was originally the result of Yang Chendong's countless experiences of life and death. It was fine if he did not make a move, but when he did, it was a saber technique that could kill with a single strike. Because of this, when the first batch of Lung Feng graduates graduated, Tai Hu even received an extra triangular stiletto made of titanium compared to the others. This stiletto could cut through iron like mud. In Tai Hu's hands, it was like a tiger that had grown wings. He did not believe that there was anyone who could be his opponent in close combat. Now that Ji Guang had drawn his embroidered spring saber, he naturally did not fear him in the slightest. He even had enough confidence. After saying that he was ignorant, Tai Hu moved. He swept towards Ji Guang like a gust of wind. Ji Guang also moved, but he adopted a conservative defensive strategy. Before he figured out the tricks and details of the person in front of him, he decided to use defense instead of offense, looking for the most suitable opportunity. In the past, when faced with a sneak attack, Ji Guang also did the same. Moreover, he had succeeded. Who knew how many people had fallen in front of him, and he had found an opportunity to kill them instead. But this time, although he was full of confidence, he was destined to be disappointed. This was because the moment the military knife and embroidered spring saber collided with each other, the saber's body was split into two after the collision. By the time Ji Guang reacted, he felt a sharp pain on his left leg. There was already a deep cut there. Ji Guang did not know that this was because Yang Chendong had given the order not to kill anyone. Otherwise, if Tai Hu had changed the cut to a stiletto, a wound that could not be stopped would have appeared. Then, even if he did not die now, it would not be long before he died because of the incessant bleeding. With just one move, Ji Guang was defeated. His left leg was trembling because of the flowing force, and he could not even stand steadily. How could he dare to think about winning? After Tai Hu succeeded in one move, he put away the triangular stiletto that was covered in white light. Then, he turned and left without saying another word. Sometimes, when facing smart people, if you had to tell them your purpose, it would be an insult to their intelligence. Tai Hu left. Just like when he came, he suddenly appeared, and when he left, he suddenly disappeared. When he was sure that there was no killing intent in the surroundings and no danger, Ji Guang's left leg went soft, and he half knelt on the ground with a plop. Even though Ji Guang had experienced life and death, he was still covered in cold sweat. Tai Hu was the only expert he had met in his life, and he took his life in one move. Now that he thought about it, no matter how he thought about it, it was terrifying. When he raised his head again, he realized that there was still candlelight in the village pavilion. At this moment, Ji Guang suddenly felt old and tired. In his position, he was prominent in front of others, but who knew how fearful he was when there was no one around? He, who had just experienced a life and death situation, wanted to have a good rest. The village gazing pavilion seemed to be his final resting place. Ji Guang dragged his bleeding leg and slowly walked towards the village gazing house. Then he gently knocked on the door, which was so loud in the quiet street. Ji Guang was just an abbreviation. On this night, more than 10 eunuchs with official positions who were taking shifts outside the palace were dealt with in various ways. Some were injured in the arms, some in the legs. Some even had their hair shaved off in their sleep without knowing it. This was Yang Chendong's warning. Any eunuch who dared to call himself a eunuch and was not a eunuch would be punished. The first time was a warning, but whether or not the next time would be to take someone's life, no one would know. The next morning, Chen Guan followed the plan he had discussed with Ji Guang the day before and prepared to call for a meeting. He called a few eunuch leaders here to discuss how to suppress Yang Chendong. But before he could send out the order to summon the eunuchs, more than 10 pieces of information arrived. By the time all the information was delivered to him, Chen Guan was already drenched in cold sweat. He hadn't expected that someone would move even faster than him. How did they do it? Yesterday, the 10-odd eunuchs who were taking shifts outside the palace were living in different parts of the capital, doing different things, but they were all suddenly attacked. What did this mean? It meant that a large net had been watching them for a long time, and they were just waiting for the right time to strike. If it hadn't happened, even Chen Guan wouldn't have believed it. He had thought about the consequences of offending Yang Chendong and made some preparations, but now it seemed that if the other party really wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be difficult. When a person felt that their life was in the hands of others at any time, it was a very bad feeling. Qinguang was like this now. He didn't want to call for a meeting, but when he found out about Ji Guang's whereabouts, he went straight to Village Pavilion. Ji Guang was one of the top experts in the embroidered uniform guards, and he had personally experienced the feeling of being attacked last night. It was probably the most direct and effective to ask him how he felt. When Chen Guan brought a group of trusted aides to Village Pavilion, Ji Guang was resting in bed in Li Xiuer's boudoir upstairs. But no matter how one looked at Li Xiuer, she was glowing, giving people the feeling of a new life. No one knew that last night, Ji Guang had thought it through and wanted Li Xiuer, and the two of them were officially together. At this moment, Chen Guan rushed over, and all he got was Ji Guang's dissuasion. Chen Guan rushed into Village Pavilion with a group of embroidered uniform guards, giving Li Xiuer a fright. Fortunately, Ji Guang took her hand in time and squeezed it gently to comfort her. His eyes were full of gentleness when he looked at Li Xiuer, but when he looked up and saw the other embroidered uniform guards in flying suits rushing in, his expression didn't look good at all. "All of you leave first." The group of embroidered uniform guards looked at Chen Guan hesitantly, not knowing what to do. They were here to protect Eunuch Chen. If they left like this and something really happened, they were afraid that none of them would have a good ending. "With Ji Qianxia here, you all can leave for now." Chen Guan saw Ji Guang's displeasure and thought that this person's skills were extraordinary, so he nodded in agreement. The group of embroidered uniform guards left the room, and Ji Guang said to Li Xiuer affectionately, "Yes, Hen, leave for now. I have something to say to this lord." "Okay, but don't stand up. The wound on your leg has just stopped bleeding." Li Xiuer nodded obediently, but a trace of worry still appeared on her face. Chapter 230. I will. Ji Guang chuckled and watched Li Xiuer leave the room. Chen Guan's concerned voice sounded. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Yes, I'm hurt. The other party didn't intend to take my life. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have died last night." Speaking of this, Ji Guang's mood was very calm, as if he was narrating something that had nothing to do with him. But these words were so deafening in Chen Guan's ears. "Who did it? Even you are no match for them?" "Yes, I'm not that person's opponent. Even if I was on guard, even if I brought a few subordinates, he could still easily kill me." Speaking of this, Ji Guang's mood became a little depressed. After all, in his strongest aspect, he had to admit that he was inferior to the other party. This made him feel unreconciled. But whether he was convinced or not, the reality was like this. He was indeed not Tai Hu's opponent. He couldn't even withstand one move. Feeling that Ji Guang's tone seemed to be disheartened, Chen Guan asked tentatively, "Was it that person who did it?" Sigh. A long sigh. After what happened last night, Ji Guang thought it through and accepted it. Yang Chendong was not someone he could afford to offend. Moreover, this person ignored the law and acted extremely decisively and ruthlessly. He hadn't expected to make a move on his own accord, so he hadn't been on guard at all. Of course, if such an opponent was bent on targeting you, what could you do even if you were prepared? Forget it, Eunuch Chen. Some people are destined to be beyond our ability to deal with. If we have to force it, I'm afraid we will lose our lives. After being silent for a long time, Ji Guang said such words that Chen Guan could not believe. "Are you afraid?" Chen Guan did not believe that the always confident and arrogant Ji Guang would bow his head one day, and so completely. "Yes, I'm afraid," Ji Guang admitted frankly. "If that person wants to kill me, he can do it at any time. Tell me, Eunuch Chen, facing such an opponent, what do you want me to do? Would he continue to oppose that person until he lost his life? This time he's targeting me. I'm afraid he'll harm Eunuch Chen next time. Listen to me and let go." Knowing that Ji Guang still didn't know what had happened to the other eunuchs, Chen Guan let out a long breath and said, "Actually, he didn't just target you. Just last night, there were 13 steward eunuchs who were targeted. If they were injured, if their lives were threatened." "What?" Ji Guang, who was half lying on the bed, suddenly stood up. He stared at Qin Guan and asked, "Is what eunuch Qin said true? I'm not lying to you." Chen Guan shook his head, his eyes filled with disappointment. Especially when he thought about how he had gone to the Yang family village to denounce them yesterday, he felt that it was so ridiculous. The other party had already made preparations and was just waiting for them to rush forward. They were so confused that they actually did as they were told. It was no wonder that they were scared and threatened. Chen Guan admitted it. This gave Ji Guang a big fright. His mind spun slightly, as if he had thought of something. He asked, "Eunuch Chen, where is he right now?" Although he didn't mention his name, Chen Guan still understood what Ji Guang meant. He replied, "I just received news that he went to Chicken Crow Mountain yesterday afternoon." Went to Chicken Crow Mountain? Who went with him? Are the servants who usually follow him here? Thinking of a possibility, Ji Guang asked aloud. "They're all there. Even the mercenaries guarding the Yang family bank, the Immortal abode, and the sky beyond heaven are all there. They didn't do anything strange." Chen Guan said this somewhat painfully. His face turned even uglier. When Jining heard this, he also sucked in a cold breath. Yang Chendong had gone to Chicken Crow Mountain. This was to create an alibi for him. With a group of subordinates by his side, the others had no choice but to forcibly separate him from the attack on the eunuchs last night. But this was the most frightening thing. If those people were still standing there, it could only mean one thing. After leaving the capital, the Duke of Loyalty still had people he could use, and they were people they didn't know existed. Last night, it had been these people who had attacked. The mercenaries were already very frightening. Now an unknown and mysterious force had appeared. How could they not be shocked? When he thought about how there was probably a pair of eyes watching his every move, Ji Guang couldn't help but shiver, and then he shook his head. "Forget it, Eunuch Qin. Listen to this official's advice and let him go. We'll tell Eunuch Jin the situation and let him beat and punish him. As for what he wants to do, that's his business. As for us, we'll just obediently stay here." "What? But if we do that, Jin Ing will inevitably look down on us," Chen Guan immediately retorted when he heard that Ji Guang was admitting defeat. "So what if he looks down on us? It's better than losing his life. Besides, we gave him all of Wang Jin's treasures, so we've done a great service. Even if we put on a show for others, he won't touch us right now." Ji Guang shook his head. He knew that after making this decision, the chances of him being put in an important position were extremely small. But when he thought about Yang Chendong's various tricks, he suddenly felt that he was invincible. Ji Guang's words echoed in Chen Guan's ears, and after thinking for a long time, he finally made his decision. "Fine. You rest and recover. I'll go and speak with Eunuch Jin." Chen Guan left, and not long after, he went to the palace to see Jin Ing. He gave her a detailed account of what had happened yesterday afternoon and last night. In the end, he stated his own judgment that the Duke of Loyalty still had a mysterious force in the capital that they couldn't see. This force was so powerful that they couldn't deal with it. Jin Ing had just received Wang Jin's silver and was in a good mood. But when he heard Xin Guan's report, his face paled again and again. He suddenly recalled the result of his agreement with Yang Chendong. They had agreed to mind their own business, but now, Yang Chendong had broken the agreement. If there really was such a mysterious force that suddenly wanted to target him, what would he do? Jin Ing had just obtained great authority, so he needed to properly enjoy it. He didn't want to die at this moment. Thus, he quickly made his decision. Forget it. Since the Duke of Loyalty has Wang Jin's receipt, we'll let this matter rest. In addition, without this Duke's permission, you went to make trouble for the Duke of Loyalty. Since you were the ones who provoked this matter, you should resolve it yourselves. In short, we need to keep the peace. I don't want to see anyone injured or even killed because of this. Jin Ing shamelessly pushed all the blame onto Chen Guan and Ji Guang, choosing to stay out of the matter. Chen Guan sighed in relief that he would no longer pursue the matter of the silver, but he was also put in a very difficult position when he had to apologize. Eunuch Jin, is the Duke of Loyalty at Chicken Crow Mountain? Should we wait for him to come back? There's no need to wait. Some things should be resolved as soon as possible. How about this? You and Ji Guang immediately go to Chicken Crow Mountain. You must have a good attitude and be sincere. Do you understand? Jin Ing didn't want any accidents to happen when he left the palace, so he wanted to resolve the matter as soon as possible. Chen Guan left with a disheartened expression. After he left, there was a ban in the palace that spread among the group of eunuchs. In the future, no matter which eunuch they were, they had to address themselves as this duke, instead of this duke. Otherwise, they would have to bear the consequences. Chicken Crow Mountain. It was the end of autumn, and early winter was about to arrive. The leaves on the mountain were beginning to turn yellow, giving people a very bleak feeling. However, this didn't stop Hu Yen and Xiao Yin's interest. They arranged for people to bring out the meat skewers and all kinds of food that they had brought. Then they lit a fire, causing the air in the area to become much warmer. In response, Yang Chendong watched from the side without any intention of interfering. He liked to see his women happy. In his opinion, this was one of the goals he pursued. If he wanted the people to be happy, he first had to let his family be happy. Then, it would be the happiness of the entire Han people. With the experience from last time, Hu Yen and Xiao Yin were able to command the troops in an orderly manner. Yang Chendong didn't have to do any skewers like last time. He only needed to sit and enjoy the success. When the sky slowly darkened, the bonfire lit up the sky. Hu Yen and Xiao Yin had also prepared everything. Just as they were about to call Lu Lang to enjoy with them, Tiger's mane walked over. "Young master, Chen Guan and Ji Guang are here." "So fast?" Yang Chendong, who had been prepared for this, was still somewhat curious when he heard that the two had rushed over in just a little more than a day. "Yes, there are also 30 embroidered uniform guards. Among them, Ji Guang was carried over." Tiger's mane continued to explain the situation. Let them wait outside. This young master will go and see them in a while." Yang Chendong casually waved his hand. Since they had done something wrong, they should have the attitude of admitting their mistakes. Leaving them out for a while was just training. After sending away Tiger's mane, Yang Chendong followed Hu Yen and Xiao Yin to the bonfire. Everyone was waiting for them here. Outside, a few members of Cold Front were closely watching Chen Guan and Ji Guang's group. They had already been waiting here for nearly 2 hours. The weather at this time would become cold at night. The two of them didn't bring any warm clothing, so they felt a little cold. However, they could only endure it. This time, they were here to admit their mistakes. They weren't here to collect debts like yesterday. Chapter 231. A head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate and a commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Normally, they were lofty figures, but right now, they were like children who had done something wrong, waiting for the adults to forgive them. On the other side, Yang Chendong was gargling his mouth after eating and drinking to his heart's content, while listening to Tiger's man's report on the information he'd received during the day. "Oh, so Wolf's man and the others did well?" "Yes, they did very well. The process was clean and efficient." According to Yang San, it was beyond his expectations. Tiger's man replied in a low voice. "Very good. Give them a collective third-class merit." Yang Chendong chuckled, then spat out the last mouthful of water in his mouth. "Are they still waiting?" "They're waiting. Without the young master's permission, they wouldn't dare leave." Tiger's man's face lit up with joy. Even though he hadn't been the one to do it, seeing Chen Guan and the others lower their heads still made him happy. A hint of a smile flashed across Yang Chendong's face. Some people were just like that. They didn't want to be nice to others, and insisted on being beaten up before they knew what pain was. Forget it. It's already been 2 hours. It's getting dark, and they probably didn't bring any blankets. We can't keep them here for the night and then give them their things, can we? Tiger's man nodded in agreement. That's right. We'll just let them dry for a while. As for blankets and whatnot, we don't have any extra. Ha! Yang Chendong laughed heartily. Then, Tiger's man and Beta Persei led the way to where Chen Guan and Ji Guang were. No one knew what they talked about when they met. However, those who were observant noticed one thing. The embroidered uniform guard that had been standing guard outside the Immortal abode street had all disappeared. In their place were the soldiers of the warden's office. It was also from this time onwards that everyone really managed to keep to themselves on the surface. The Immortal abode was still packed to the brim, and the Beyond Heaven's Gate was also bustling with activity. Batch after batch of rare goods were being sent out from the gate to different locations. People were walking around the Yang family bank, either depositing or withdrawing money. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Time passed by 1449, and it was the Spring Festival of 1450. The Spring Festival of the Great Ming Dynasty was the busiest time of the year, and it was also the time for families to reunite. The entire capital was bustling with activity. Even the commoners were like this, let alone the people in the palace. As the emperor, not only did he have to reward his subjects for their hard work over the past year, he also had to receive many foreign diplomatic missions. This was especially true for the Great Ming Dynasty, which was a grand and powerful country. There were many vassal states and countries that didn't want to be conquered. Every year during the new year, they would send envoys to pay tribute to show their submission or respect. This year was also Zhu Qiyu's first time as emperor. In order to show their respect, the diplomatic missions from many countries were much larger than in previous years. For a period of time, it was common to see people in strange attire in the capital. The population of the capital was rapidly increasing, and the number of consumers was increasing by the day. The business of the merchants was getting better, and more shops were opening. The shops that Yang Chendong had bought at a low price were rented out. Even though the prices were a little higher, they were still in short supply, allowing him to make a small profit. The capital began to prosper once more. This was the scene of a peaceful era. Places like the Immortal abode, which were usually bustling with activity, were now even more difficult to find. This was especially true after the drama of the war between the war god and the Walla, which attracted even more praise. Anyone who saw this drama felt their blood boil, and even after leaving the Immortal abode, they were still talking about it. At this time, it was time for Dai Zong to summon soldiers, and because of this, many people were seeking to join him. The Great Ming's military was primarily supported by military households. The so-called military households were born soldiers. Your father was a soldier. After becoming a military household, as long as you gave birth to a son, he would have to become a soldier when he grew up. This also ensured that the number of soldiers in the army would reach a stable level. However, the Battle of Tuma Fortress and Shihang's defeat had severely damaged the army, and its numbers were severely lacking. In these circumstances, Dai Zong, Zhu Qiyu, issued the order for the first conscription after taking the throne. He had originally believed that the treatment of soldiers was poor, and that there wouldn't be many who wanted to join the army, perhaps even a few. He had never imagined that the drama in the Immortal abode would cause many young people, and even a few scholars, to join the army. When the news got out, it caused an uproar among the nobles. The Great Ming despised the military and emphasized the scholarly, even suppressing the military. The treatment and status of soldiers in society had always been extremely low. But now, there were scholars joining the army. Although it could be said that these scholars didn't have much of a future, for them to join the army was still a loss of face for scholars. Because of this, some proud literati hated Yang Chendong to the point that they even hated him. They believed that it was because of the drama in the Immortal abode that this had happened, and that he was the main culprit. He had brought shame to all the scholars in the world. But just as they were discussing this, the Yang clan manor suddenly opened a Yang clan academy. To outsiders, it was said that the loyal and courageous duke had nothing better to do, and wanted to experience the feeling of teaching and educating people. But in reality, only he knew that this was for the future development of the Xianxia Academy. Even though there were many advanced books in Crimson City, they had all been forcefully instilled by Yang Chendong. Without coming into contact with them, seeing them, or even understanding the principles behind them, it was difficult for them to make any progress. This gave young Master Yang the idea of nurturing talents and sending them to Crimson City. This was something he had no choice but to do. With Yang Chendong's current status and the schemes he had set up, It was impossible for him to leave the capital. Now was not the time for him to leave the capital and the center of power of the great Ming dynasty. Since he could not return to Crimson City, he naturally could not go back to impart knowledge. His only choice was to find talents in the capital and impart knowledge to them. With the scholars joining the army and the sudden opening of the Yang Clan Academy, the Yang Clan manor instantly became the focus of all the scholars' condemnation. Some people even dug up Yang Chendong's history, claiming that he had only been an elementary scholar and that even his status as a high scholar had been bestowed upon him by emperor. Perhaps he had some literary talent, knew how to do business, and even knew a little about the art of war. But when it came to opening an academy, he was far too lacking. One had to know that those who were able to open an academy had to have sufficient knowledge to do so. It was not something that could be done by a random brat. There were many voices of opposition. Similarly, there were many supporters. Because of Yang Chendong, many of his books were published, and he was hailed as the #1 prodigy of the younger generation. In addition, he had composed many new songs, earning him the title of Eastern Commander. He had saved Emperor Ing, defeated Walla, and protected the position of Emperor Dai. This caused his fame to soar, and he had many admirers in the army. How could such a person lack supporters? If this was in the future, Yang Chendong could probably create a Weibo account and have tens of millions of fans in just a few minutes. There were supporters, but there were also opponents. The matter became more and more serious. Eventually, the matter reached the imperial court and reached Zhu Qiyu, the acting sect master. Zhu Qizhen had some headaches about Yang Chendong. Although this person was an official, due to his young age, he didn't seem to have the awareness of being an official. He had once been conferred the title of General of Agile Cavalry, which was equivalent to a second-rank official, but he had never attended the royal court. It was even very difficult for him, the emperor, to see him. In his own words, he was still young and too playful. He would talk about politics in the royal court later. Given that Yang Chendong's actions were always unexpected, Zhu Qiyu agreed to his request. After all, he was also worried that this person would cause trouble today and tomorrow, causing headaches. However, he didn't expect that even if he didn't enter the royal court, he would still be able to cause trouble. It was like setting up a Yang family academy. You don't do good business, but learn the elegance of a scholar. Isn't this looking for trouble? Zhu Qiyu had a headache. In the royal court, there were people loudly criticizing, but there were also many officials who lowered their heads in silence to show their support. He couldn't help but feel a little headache. My beloved subjects, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has only opened an academy. As far as I know, he didn't recruit many people, only 50. This doesn't seem to be a big deal. Why do you need to bring it up to the imperial court? Your Majesty, that's not right. As soon as Zhu Qiyu's voice fell, an old official stepped out from the crowd. He held a ceremonial tablet in his hand and had a serious and nervous expression on his face. Teaching and educating people is something that can only be done if there are great scholars and virtuous practitioners. Although Duke Zhongdan is quite good in other aspects, he is only a scholar. How can he take on such an important task? The person who spoke was called He Wenyuan. His courtesy name was Zhu Chuan, and his title was Dongyuan. He was also called Dunnan, and he was from Shujiang Town in Guangchang County. He Wenyuan was knowledgeable and well-versed in astronomy and geography. He was very talented in writing and was good at poetry. His works included Dongyuan Ji, Yiting Sun, 4 books lecture, records of rites and explanations, Dun and Memorial, Herdsman's Spare Book, Criminal Magistrate's Spare Book, and so on. At that time, he was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. His appearance represented the attitude of the literati. It was a rejection of Yang Chendong's so-called Yang Academy. Speaking of which, Yang Chendong came from a famous family. He was the youngest son of Yang Rong, one of the 3 Yangs. He had also become a scholar at a young age, so he should have been a model scholar. However, he chose to be a merchant in place of an official and led the army into battle. He went from a literati to a semi-martial person and obtained the position of duke. He became a duke before the age of 20. This made many people envious, and many people secretly refused to accept it. They only thought that if they had the chance, they would teach Yang Chendong a lesson and teach him a lesson. After all, a person who reached the peak before the age of 20 that many people would never be able to reach in their lifetime would have such a mentality. Chapter 232. He had always been jealous, but he had lacked an opportunity to ignite it. Now that Yang Chendong was going to open an academy, he Wenyuan, as one of the great scholars, had to express his stance. That's right, that's right. With someone stepping forward, many of the civil officials nodded their heads in agreement, clearly showing their support for He Wenyuan. The reason why so many of the officials stood up to oppose Yang Chendong was not only because of jealousy, but also because of the rules of scholars. Did scholars have rules? Of course they did. Every profession had its own rules, and anyone who wanted to break them would have to pay a heavy price. It was normal for scholars to open academies to teach and educate people. Not only could he promote his name, but he could also take the opportunity to recruit more students, expand his influence, and also collect a lot of money. This was a typical way for scholars to make a fortune. However, because of this, not everyone could open an academy. If one did not have a certain amount of social influence or was not recognized by the group of scholars, opening an academy would only cause them to be criticized, because the scholars would not allow such a thing to happen. Otherwise, if anyone could open an academy, where would they be able to make a living? Whether it was out of jealousy or wanting to maintain their own status and influence, in short, if Yang Chendong wanted to get involved in the matter of starting an academy, they would definitely stop him. He Wenyuan stood up, and then several influential civil officials stood up to express their opposition. Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, narrowed his eyes into a line. He knew how powerful the civil officials were, and he knew that deep down, these scholars looked down on him. This was the disadvantage of only respecting Confucianism. This was because once upon a time, the founders of the Great Ming Dynasty had also been rejected by the scholars. It was only because the Great Saber and Great Stick were too powerful that they had no choice but to lower their heads. In fact, in the changing of dynasties, there were very few emperors who were truly recognized by the scholars. On the contrary, in their hearts, the true orthodox was Confucius's Kong family. That was their pilgrimage ground. With the change of dynasties, countless emperors fell from their horses, countless scholars were killed, and countless commoners were displaced from place to place. But no matter how one looked at it, the Kong clan had always stood strong. The Kong family was the epitome of a man's ability to submit and stand tall. The Mongols came to visit the Mongols, and the Manchus came to visit the Manchus. Li Zicheng had just entered Shandong and was still far away from Ciufu when he shouted, "Long live Emperor Yongchang." When Yuan Shikai proclaimed himself emperor, he said, "Ascend the throne as soon as possible to comfort the people." Zhang Sun was overjoyed after his restoration. Let the whole world celebrate. In 1937, before the Japanese army invaded China, Kong Deqing, the sage Duke of Yenxing, had a great interest in poetry. He advocated that China and Japan were of the same language and the same kind. The poem said, "Rivers, rivers, rivers, pearls, and streams are the same. How could there be different people in the same province?" This was a little confusing. Were you trying to express goodwill to the locust army? The longevity of the Kong clan was even greater than that of the imperial family. It was even a holy land for scholars in the world. Even the emperor sometimes had to look at his face when doing things. Just like Zhu Qiyu in history, in order to make his son Zhu Jianji the crown prince, he actually bribed the officials of the imperial court. In the history books, the scholars of the imperial court received a special reward from the emperor, 50 taels of gold and double the amount of silver. Why would the Jingtai emperor, Zhu Qiyu, want to reward the officials? It turned out that the reward this time was actually a bribe. The Jingtai emperor wanted to use the reward to shut the mouths of the officials, to keep their mouths shut. This was why the Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, looked at the gold and silver rewarded by the emperor and stamped his feet. He said, "What is this? I am ashamed to death." Even the emperor sometimes had to look at the faces of scholars, not to mention Yang Chendong wanting to establish an academy. With his status and qualifications, it was normal for him to be opposed and reprimanded by everyone. However, Yang Chendong had just made a great contribution and was given the title of Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Moreover, he was stripped of all his other powers. At this moment, how could Zhu Qiu make irresponsible remarks to him? Since the scholars weren't willing to let him establish an academy, he'd just let the scholars handle it. Thinking of this, his expression relaxed a lot. As for the matter of Zhonghua opening the Yang Family Academy, we still need to consider it carefully. Of course, if there are any officials who disagree, you can go and reason with them. This is also a way to promote the culture of our great Ming dynasty. Zhu Qiu didn't say that he was against it, but he also didn't say that he was for it. If you have the ability, go find the Duke of Loyalty and Courage yourselves. This was also Zhu Qiu's answer. With the emperor's words, He Wenyuan and the others immediately beamed with joy. They were worried that the emperor would agree. If that was the case, they would be going against the emperor's will if they went to the Yang clan manor. This could be used against them by the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards. But now that they had the emperor's decree, they could do things with fewer misgivings. Immortal abode. The streets were bustling with people and carriages, vividly displaying the prosperity of the capital. The immortal abode, where the world's best delicacies and best services were gathered, the sky beyond heaven, where all the world's rare treasures were gathered, and the Yang clan's bank had mountains of gold and silver. Because of this, the entire street was bustling with activity. If anyone who came to the capital didn't come here to take a look, they would be too embarrassed to say that they had ever been to the capital. This place had already become a symbol of the capital. This was especially true for the entrance to the immortal abode. Ever since breakfast, it had been packed with people. By the time the performance started, there wasn't a single empty seat to be seen. As the number of members increased by the day, it was becoming increasingly difficult to reserve a seat in advance. If even the members were like this, there was no need to mention the visitors. As the new year approached, more and more foreign ambassadors arrived. When they wanted to taste the delicacies here, they had no choice but to line up with the common folk of the great Ming dynasty. Even though most of those who could come here wore silk robes and had a certain level of status, it was still viewed as an insult to the common folk to line up with them. There had been a number of ministers who had disagreed on this matter. They said that the foreign ambassadors should be given special treatment to express the magnanimity of the great Ming dynasty. But Emperor Daizong had sent these memorials to Yang Chendong. The immortal abode was his place, so the decision was naturally up to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong had only memorized the names of the people who had written these memorials, but he hadn't read their contents in detail. Why did foreign ambassadors have to be superior to others? Worshipping foreigners was a sign of weakness deep in one's bones. Since Yang Chendong had come, he would never allow such a thing to happen. Treating everyone equally was already extremely benevolent. If it weren't for the fact that he needed to earn money from the foreign ambassadors right now, he would have already issued an order that only Han citizens were allowed to enter. Yang Chendong's indifference meant that the foreign ambassadors who wanted to enter the immortal abode had no choice but to line up. Even though they were full of grievances and had expressions of displeasure, when they knew that the rules couldn't be changed, there were still people who came to line up outside the immortal abode. Today, there was a woman in the line with an indifferent expression. She was indeed an astonishingly beautiful woman. She was dressed in the women's clothing of the great Ming dynasty. Her skin was as white as snow, and her eyes were as bright as the moon. In particular, her exquisite facial features made men's hearts itch. Speaking of which, this woman had quite the background. She wasn't actually a citizen of the great Ming dynasty, but rather a Japanese who lived at sea. Her name was Ohara Junko. Among the many people in the queue, Ohara Junko was undoubtedly an angel. Her appearance also made some of the men who were originally shouting in the queue shut their mouths. It seemed that they all wanted to leave a good impression in front of such a beauty. Junko was also protected by a few guards who weren't very tall, but had cold eyes. This only served to highlight her noble status. Her identity was truly not simple. Junko's father was Hito, the current emperor of the Inner Garden of Japan. She had come to the capital of the great Ming dynasty to broaden her horizons and seek opportunities. Hito was the emperor of the Muromachi period, the 102nd emperor. He had ascended the throne on September 7, 1428. He was the great-grandson of Emperor Hito, the son of Prince Fushimi Masayoshi, and the adopted son of Emperor Gokomatsu. He was also known as the Emperor of the Inner Garden. During the reign of the Emperor of the Inner Garden, not only was there a rebellion between two Ichiki and Kaji, the dissatisfied people of the southern dynasty were also rioting, causing the political situation to become unstable. In addition, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa lived a life of luxury and enjoyed himself. His power was immense, and the emperor had to reprimand him. It was precisely because the domestic situation was unstable that the emperor of the Inner Garden wanted to find a way out from outside. This time, when he heard that the new emperor of the great Ming dynasty defeated the elite cavalry of Wala, he sent an envoy with the intention of strengthening the relationship between the two countries and seeking some help. Junko came with the envoy for another purpose. According to the emperor of the Inner Garden, if his daughter could be married to the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, then he would have a powerful foreign aid, and at that time, his words in Japan would be much more powerful. In order to achieve this goal, the appearance of his daughter Junko was still a secret. At least before the matter was settled, it was not suitable to spread it out and attract the attention of other forces in the country. But now, Junko appeared in public so calmly because her matter had already come to an end. That was, the acting emperor of the great Ming dynasty had a new empress and more than a dozen concubines. It was difficult for her to find a suitable position to intervene now. Moreover, her son was too young and was still in his infancy. In any case, it was impossible for him to marry Junko and form an alliance with Japan. Chapter 233. It was precisely because she couldn't achieve her goal that Junko had decided to openly dress as a woman and walk out from the group of Japanese envoys. She had also heard that the Immortal abode had delicious delicacies that couldn't be found outside, as well as joyous music and dancing. Her curiosity had been piqued, and she wanted to see what was going on. Junko had inherited her parents' strengths, and although she was only 15 years old, she was like the brightest star in the crowd. No one could ignore her even if they wanted to. Important news, important news. The Duke of Zhongdan has opened the Yang Clan Academy, and this has incurred the displeasure of some of the officials. Just a moment ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, He Wenyuan, led a dozen Confucian scholars and officials to the Yang Clan manor to demand an explanation. An earth-shattering shout suddenly came from the crowd, causing many of the men who had been paying attention to Junko to change their minds. Who was Yang Chendong? There was no need for an introduction. There was no one here who didn't know him. Whether it was the Immortal abode, the sky beyond heaven, or the Yang Clan Bank, they were all his handiwork. This was the idol of many young people, and now, someone was going to cause trouble for him. This was definitely big news, and a rare occurrence. When the crowd heard the news, they all rushed toward the southern part of the city. They wanted to see how the Dong Shui would deal with He Wenyuan and the other Confucian scholars. At this moment, not only did the line outside shrink, many of the diners who had been eating in the Immortal abode also walked out, causing the originally crowded street to become much emptier. With so many people leaving, those who remained were particularly conspicuous. Among them were Junko and several of her guards. Little Lin Kuan, did they go to see the Dong Shui? Junko's crisp voice rang out in somewhat awkward Chinese. Among the guards, a young man with a mustache was originally looking around with a serious expression. When he heard Junko's voice, he immediately turned around and nodded. Princess, they really did go to see the Dong Shui. According to the information we received, the Dong Shui is not in the capital, but in the Yang Clan Manor 15 li south of the city. The Yang Clan Manor? Junko also wants to go take a look. With a trace of desire in her eyes, Junko said in a moving voice. This. Xiao Lin hesitated when he heard the princess' request. In the capital, the princess's safety was guaranteed, but once she left this place, he truly didn't dare to guarantee anything. Not hearing Kobayashi's exact answer, Junko's face flashed an innocent smile. What's wrong? Could it be that Shaolin Kun had no confidence in his own strength? My father has said that little Lin Kun is one of the best of the younger generation in Japan. Even my father's guards are not much stronger than you. Junko's affirmative voice reached Kobayashi's ears. His body suddenly straightened, and at this moment he seemed to have become much taller. Well, since the princess is interested, Kobayashi will certainly fulfill her wish. Then let's set off now. Alright, thank you for your hard work, Korean Kun. After her brilliant plan succeeded, Junko's face returned to normal, as if she wasn't the girl who was begging just now. Outside the Yang Manor, He Wenyuan and several other great scholars were standing in the square 50 meters away from the manor. None of them were wearing official robes. Obviously, they were going to question Yang Chendong in an unofficial capacity. It wasn't that He Wenyuan and the others didn't know how to oppress others. On the contrary, it was precisely because they knew about Yang Chendong's achievements and knew that he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage that they gave up showing themselves as officials. In fact, with their status, they really couldn't make Yang Chendong take the initiative to make any concessions. Yang Si and Yang Lu were standing 50 meters away from He Wenyuan and the others. They stared at everything in front of them, looking at the great scholars and the sea of people behind them. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a sea of people. With a rough estimate, there were more than 1,000 people who came to watch the show. When they were all gathered there, the official road was already crowded with people. Even those who came later to watch the show had to stand by the roadside and the ditches. Since this place became the Yang Manor, it hadn't been so lively. Even when Yang Chendong got married, although there were many guests, there weren't more than 1,000. It was unexpectedly so lively this time. Naturally, Yang Si and Yang Lu, who were responsible for the security of the outer court, were a little nervous. Among the crowd, Junko also came here under the protection of Shaolin and the others. It had to be said that in many cases, the use of money was still very great. When Shaolin took out some broken silver, he quickly let some people of the great Ming dynasty who came early to watch the show give up the best position. This also allowed Junko to stand in the most advantageous position and watch the battle between the scholars of this foreign country. He Wenyuan and the others came very early, but they weren't in a hurry to say anything. They were waiting for more witnesses to embarrass Yang Chendong. Now that the people had gathered, He Wenyuan and the others looked at each other and reached an agreement. In the end, it was the left assistant minister who stepped forward and said to Yang Si and Yang Lu, who were 50 meters away, "Is the Duke of Zhongdan so arrogant? We have been here for half a day, why haven't we seen him? Could it be that he is afraid?" Afraid? How could our family's duke be afraid of scholars like you? Yang Si's eyes had a hint of ridicule as he stepped forward. Our family's duke is busy every day and has a lot of things to do. He doesn't have time to waste on you. If you don't have anything important to say, please go back. How could He Wenyuan, a great scholar, look good when he was despised by a scholar? But in the end, he had been an official for many years, and his face had long been trained. His anger only lasted for a moment, and he quickly calmed down and asked back, "You said that we are scholars, but does the Duke of Zhongdan look down on all scholars in the world?" Yang Si's face darkened when he was suddenly countered with a slip of the tongue. He wanted to refute something, but he didn't know where to start. After all, fighting with his fists was his forte, and in terms of talking, he was far inferior to the few Confucians. Seeing that Yang Si's face was burning with anger, but he didn't know how to answer, He Wenyuan looked up to the sky and roared, as if he had already won and done something satisfying. "The Duke has arrived." At this moment, a thunderous shout sounded. Yang Chendong, dressed in green and holding a folding fan, approached from afar under the protection of Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others. Although it was only a seemingly casual green robe, as Yang Chendong's footsteps continued to approach, a wave of pressure swept over He Wenyuan and the other great scholars. Even the commoners who were closer to them to watch the show felt a sense of oppression. It was as if they were not facing a group of people, but a prehistoric divine beast. Yang Chendong was always like this, giving different people different feelings. As a friend, he was as warm as the sun. As an enemy, he was as happy to suppress them like a storm. When did this duke say that he looked down on scholars? Scholars are a part of this society, just like farmers, merchants, and workers. They can all create value and contribute to the progress of this society. They are all worthy of respect. Before he even arrived, his voice was already heard. It was just one sentence, but it attracted loud cheers from the people who were watching the commotion. Most of the people who came to watch the show were farmers, merchants, and workers. Yang Chendong's words had attracted everyone's consensus, and he had instantly changed his role and become the spokesperson of these people. How could it not arouse everyone's good feelings? However, He Wenyuan and the others who heard this sentence also had ugly expressions on their faces. Regardless of whether others could hear it or not, they heard it very clearly. That was, this loyal duke had compared farmers, merchants, workers, and scholars. Just from this point alone, it was inevitable that they would feel dissatisfied. During the Great Ming Dynasty, not everyone could go to school, nor did they have the opportunity to. Firstly, the cost of studying was high, and it was necessary to hire good teachers to teach, which required money. Secondly, scholars also paid attention to the difference in family background. If one did not have a good family background, even if one went to school and did not have a recommendation, it would be difficult for one to have a bright future. Often, one could only write letters for others and work as an accountant. That was also very difficult to be looked down upon. Thirdly, the proportion of scholars who eventually became a xiozai, an imperial scholar, or an official was relatively small. Many people might have studied for a lifetime, but it would be difficult for them to become a xiozai until they died. It was a waste of money and time, and there might not be a good result. This made most of the people unable to bear it. There were statistics in the history books, and the proportion of scholars in the Great Ming Dynasty was less than 1%. In other words, it was difficult to find one scholar in 100 people, which made their status even more noble. Yang Chendong classified them as ordinary people, so it was no wonder they were angry and did not give him a good face. Loyal Duke? This official knows that you are good with words, and I also know that you have some talent, especially in storytelling, which is beyond the reach of ordinary people. However, establishing an academy is not something that can be done by relying on a few absurd stories. That will only mislead the students, do you understand? He Wenyuan cleverly did not argue with Yang Chendong about the status of scholars. Instead, he went straight to the point, saying that Yang Chendong's ability was limited and that he was not qualified for such a big matter as opening an academy. This official does not know. Yang Chendong waited for He Wenyuan's voice to fall, and straightforwardly shook his head. This official only knows that teaching and educating people is a matter of great virtue. Being able to let the common people of the world know more words and understand more knowledge is the way of the good. In order to achieve this goal, this duke's teaching will not charge a single copper coin for tuition, and 2 meals will be provided. If the student is talented, this duke will recommend a suitable position for him or her, so that he or she can bring honor to his or her ancestors and family. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.